over 100 new Pokémon in Pokémon Diamond and Pokémon Pearl. They're gonna be everywhere. Ready to catch, battle, and trade. Pokémon Diamond and Pokémon Pearl. Gotta catch 'em all. Only for Nintendo DS, rated E for everyone.
As mentioned before in previous parts of this retrospective, Game Freak, after dealing with the more turbulent developments of Gen 1 and 2, knew that they needed a far more concrete plan going forward. So, during the early parts of Generation 3, the teams have already made preparations for what the next step for the series would be after it, and how it would tie into Nintendo's upcoming new handheld, the Nintendo Dual Screen, aka the DS. The ideas behind this new generation came from, ironically, the beginning. How the Pokemon world came into being, the many myths, legends surrounding the place, including its creation. A further delving into the many gods of this world, already sort of explored in some form or fashion with the legends of Generation 2 and 3, which features some apocalyptic beasts and others that were like worshipped by devoted followers in many temples and shrines. They also wanted to reinvent a lot of the gameplay into something we'd find a lot more familiar in modern installments, with things such as the physical special split and online capabilities. The newest titles would also get plenty of references in the current third generation, with many cameos to the newest titles in things like games, animes, and movies. It was safe to say that Diamond and Pearl were probably the most anticipated games the series had had up to that point. But hey, what new games aren't? As for myself, this was the game that fully introduced me to Pokémon. After the Lucario movie first enveloped me into the world that would soon to become my largest obsession as a child and one of my biggest inspirations as an adult. I remember my early years playing with Pokemon toys, watching whatever bits of the anime I could catch on TV, and of course finally getting my hands on the game during a birthday party at Chuck E. Cheese. I also think that was the last time I was ever at one of those before my family moved, like we so often did at that time. But I didn't mind, I was a quiet kid full of dreams and stories, mostly taking place in the wonderful world of Pokemon that kept me company during those trying times. And when I wasn't playing Pokemon, I was learning, delving deep into every single Pokemon site I could find, learning everything there was to learn about the series. I was obsessive and it was a lot of fun. Though, ironically, I don't think I ever beat one of these games till like Heart Gold and Soul Silver came out, or maybe sometime a little after that. Before, with things like Diamond or Ruby, which I was gifted later, I kind of just fumbled around and had fun, since when I first played them, I couldn't read, and as such, I was so confused why Dawn just didn't let me continue the game until my uncle read it out to me and I had to go back home to my mom on Twin Leaf. Another thing that was kind of funny, just as a little memory, because I was unable to read the speech from Rowan in his lab, when he asked me to give my Pokemon a nickname, I thought he was just asking my name again. So, for a time, my character had my, nickname, the shortening of my name, while my Groddle just had my actual name, because, I didn't really understand what else Rowan could have been asking. I mean, there was never any nicknamed Pokemon in the anime, at least from what I saw. Again, little kid only catching it as I could on cable. But, it also didn't help that I had, a ton of those as a kid, so I probably just got confused. But hold on. I guess we should at least attempt to be analytical first, then sprinkle in some of my nostalgia later. As much as I love these games, I'm not gonna sit here and try to pretend that they're without fault, So let's at least try to do this seriously for as long as I can hold out. So how about we actually start this regional retrospective for the Sinnoh region? Part 1. Yeah, we'll get to that later. Pokemon Diamond and Pearl actually came out to pretty critical acclaim, even being hailed as the ultimate Pokemon experience, with a lot of 8 out of 10s and such, mostly due to those new features I mentioned a moment ago, which is quite the far cry from the oddly controversial takes on Ruby and Sapphire, though some did think the game appeared to be rather plain with the new 3D console in mind. But I think over time the 2.5D visuals, the mix of models and sprites, actually looked a lot better in the long run. Though I admit an entirely 3D version of Diamond and Pearl would be pretty interesting to see. Right. Never mind. We'll get there in a minute. So, as I mentioned before, Diamond and Pearl added a lot to the Pokemon formula. Let's start with battle. So in the previous games, all moves were either special or physical based on their type. All psychic moves were special, all fighting moves were physical. Pretty simple stuff, and you could probably guess which is which, depending on their type or their standard use in pop culture. However, not all Pokemon of a type had the stats to make use of their own moves, such as Sceptile or Victory Bell, two grass-type Pokemon who had a far better physical attack stat instead of a special one, which is what the grass moves typically used. So, for a good chunk of their time, a lot of Pokemon with varying stats couldn't really make use of their own typed moves, which led to a lot of Pokemon just being better than others of certain types, or Pokemon like Sceptile just hardly use any of its own type moves. But not anymore, as now attacks are now split down the middle into physical and special as well. So a move like Leaf Blade will hit for physical damage and use the physical attack stat, while moves like Leaf Storm will continue to use the special stat, which of course, like the special split before it, kind of made a lot of Pokemon a lot better, and a few of them a little worse, but that came down to move variety and less the stats themselves. Sorry Flareon, you just can't catch a break, can ya? Though, of course, like most changes, this in of itself was a very controversial one at first, but over time has become one of the defining factors of the series and was able to give a lot more Pokemon a unique way of battling, even if two of them shared the same type. The day and night cycle from Generation 2 actually returns for this game and actually becomes like a mainstay from the series from here on, with new dusk and dawn timings being included to add more gradual change between night and day. Funnily enough, even getting their own stones in the dawn and dusk stones to match with the sun and moon ones. Also bringing new evolutions to the series such as Honchkrow and Gallade. Funnily enough though, Generation 4 will go on to be famous for the variety of evolutions and pre-evolutions it added to the roster of Pokemon, such as the Roselia line, which actually gets a pre-evolution and an evolution added for these games in Badoo and Roserade. Though, to go back to Gallade for a second, that actually reminds me of another new feature added, sexual dimorphism, or in layman's terms, gender differences in Pokemon, allowing some Pokemon to have minor differences in appearance based on its gender. Though if you ever get the time, I recommend you actually go check out the cut beta ideas. Some of these are really interesting and way more noticeable. Or, in a few certain cases, have completely different evolution options based on its gender, such as Curlia and Snowrunt, who got gendered evolutions through the new stones, while also retaining the ability to evolve into either a male Gardevoir or a female Glalie. Of course, your first instinct upon learning this is wondering if they retroactively changed the Nidoran line to start as one united evolution, before branching off based on its gender. No, they did not. And I can guess why they didn't want to do that. It sort of messes with the OG 151 numbering. Even though they kind of added a lot of evolutions to the first generation for this. But come on, that was their gimmick. It would have been interesting to see them combined, but then again, you'd also need to worry about transferring over Pokemon from past generations, which definitely would have confused things if two different Pokemon were now the same one. That I can see why they didn't do that. But we can come back to the game's connectivity later. For now, let's talk about the simultaneously interesting and extremely disappointing new feature, the Super Contests. So, if you're familiar with my previous video on Hoenn, you'd know that I'm actually a pretty big fan of this side mode in Pokemon, utilizing our different monsters for more than just battles, but also for entertainment. As each of these little dudes get to compete in different segments, judging them on their talents, appearance, and popularity, which we as the players, or contest stars, get to manipulate with either special treats or knowing the correct combo moves to make our Pokemon Poke-Stars. No, not you, that's for another time. I actually really enjoyed the idea of contests in the original Ruby and Sapphire and their remakes, as they were something for us to focus on and have fun with throughout our adventure. And you may be glad to hear that they actually make a spectacular return in Sinnoh, featuring new dress-up segments as well as dance routines. Wow, this is certainly an upgrade, I hear you say, but it's actually a little mid. For one, the visual part of the competition is low-key trash. And I mean, yeah, sure, it's fun to dress up your Pokemon for certain themes, but like they're still mostly just judged based on your actual appearance stats, you know, from actually eating Poffins and stuff, which replace Pokeblocks, and have a bit of a worse minigame, but I do appreciate the Cooking Mama touchscreen shenanigans. Also, looking for the actual items to dress them up is pretty boring, and you get them randomly through Amity Square or from the Massage Girl. So, you know, good luck trying to dress to impress for the nature theme when you only got like 6 mustaches. The dancing part is actually pretty fun, as you play a rhythm game where you try your best to match the beat of the lead Pokemon, or you yourself can make up your own rhythm when you're the lead, which you need to make to the right tempo, as well as making it difficult enough for your opponents to like mess up trying to copy it. As a self-admitted rhythm game hater, I actually do kind of like this one. It's pretty fun to match the tempo when you make your own dances, as long as getting none of the fire and flames BS people try to convince me is fun. That stuff makes me nauseated. But hey, look, my dinosaur can bust a move. The actual contest, like the main part, is mostly the same, though this time obviously upgraded with the all-new battle features, as well as having the player and other contestants have to perform in front of multiple judges instead of one, adding another layer to the mind games of the competition, as you need to appeal to only one judge, but if you do so after somebody did to like the same judge, then you get points docked off your score. But at that same time, you still want to pay attention to who appeals to who, as each of them have their own little star counter like in the previous game. So if you want that bonus, you might want to risk taking a hit, or you can use a disappointing move to hurt a judge's star points if you have a feeling an opponent will want to appeal to them later. I'm actually a big fan of this change as well. It's honestly a really good addition to the gameplay. Oh, but Shabby, I hear you asking from your stupid old high horsey. If you like most of the new changes, why is this one bad? Is it the tuxedo? No, that shit's actually pretty clean. Shout out to our mom, by the way. But no, what I don't like about this place is the fact that it's just like Emerald. The contests are solely in one building in the whole region. Like, what the heck, guys? I like having the different competitions separated like gyms. Now it's just in one area, and it's far less interesting to just keep going back to Heart Home over and over and over than it would be to traveling a new town, seeing a new contest hall like in the anime, and you won't even want to like go through the hassle of balancing your team for both contests and battles, because it's like in one place the whole game, and it's far easier just to ignore it, which is very unfortunate. Because this place actually features guest characters at the higher ranks, including Jasmine from Johto, who was technically in the background for Hoenn's contest, but and our mom, who's actually like a contest star in this game. It's pretty cool lore for a character who usually just sits at the house, and I would have loved to continue the family legacy, but man, it's not as fun when it's something I had to go out of my way to go back to. Am I crazy? Am I the only one who thinks it's a problem that all the contests are just in one building instead of like separated like gyms? Like, did anyone go back to Pokestar Studios in black and white? You know what I mean? Like, it sucks. It's not as fun. Like, it takes some of the magic away. Like, maybe I'm crazy. I don't know. Let's just move on. The Underground. Now, things are getting interesting. Is what I would have said had I actually made use of this feature as a kid. This part of the game was actually pretty boring when it was just me, myself, and I most of the time. But even if you were a social outcast like me, you could still do some pretty cool stuff down here. Just actually being able to mine for different items and even fossils to have revived up top in Orberg, it was really fun. Then there was also like base creations like in the previous game, but this time you could like booby trap your friends with little mini games that they had to complete, or set it up so it just throws them all the way to the edge of the mine shaft, so that it's like way harder to like get in there and steal each other's flags. Or again, if you're alone, just mess with yourself. Ooh. Though, to get this stuff, you'll need the proper size gemstones, which can get pretty rare for certain items, though you're able to like grow them? If you cover and rebury a gem somewhere safe and come back in a few days, it'll actually be bigger, allowing you to get newer items. But that is if your friends don't go in and snatch them up, because they'll be clear on the map if you do it this way. Clearly, this whole thing would have been a lot more hectic and fun if you had friends. Not to mention, you'll also be able to do the cool side activity of meeting over 50 people in order to summon the rare Pokemon Spiritomb. Ooh. Ooh. You know, I actually thought this was like a legendary for the longest time, but it's not, which is pretty confusing. It's actually a common misconception that Spiritomb and a few other Mons in Sinnoh are like legendaries, but no, they're just kind of gimmicky, or in one case, actually just spawned from a legendary. It's a bit confusing, but the underground is still a good time. Okay, so you like the Poke Gear, right? You like the Poke Nav? Well, how about you put your hands together for the Poke-Etch, or Pokemon Watch, which fills the bottom screen when you're outside of battle, allowing the player to use a variety of apps to do cool things like take notes, flip a coin, or even like use a calculator. Okay, so like, you know how the DS came out during the whole PDA era of business? I guess that's kind of what this is for. Nintendo really wanted to market the DS to that demographic as well with the DS's awesome touchscreen. And letting kids kind of fool around with that stuff in Pokemon is cool, you know, it's at least kind of cute, not much use for it nowadays, you know. But in a pre-smartphone time, I can actually see these apps getting a lot of use on the playground. You know, to keep track of each other's battles or flip coins to see who will go first. I mostly just use mine to keep track of my party Pokemon so I didn't have to open the menu every 5 seconds. It probably would have helped had my child self like actually looked into the other apps, cause like as a kid I kinda sort of ignored it, which is sad cause the thing actually does come with some cool features like the dowsing machine, the portable friendship checker, and even some apps to help the player with breeding, which actually got quite the boost in Generation 4, with different incense items and the introduction of the Masuda method, which gave better shiny odds with egg hatching if one of the Pokemon's parents was from another country. Which brings me perfectly to the GTS, the Global Trade System. The 2000s truly were the golden age of the internet, as the World Wide Web started to grow into the homes of most families, like a plague, and as such started to infiltrate and integrate into the scene of video games, even handheld consoles. And that, of course, was the case with the Nintendo DS, able to connect to the internet to use for a variety of things, including its online store with the addition of the DSi family of systems. Of course, the same thing would come to video games, and what better series to make use of the web of connecting people all over the world than the series that pretty much popularized the idea of local connective play. At least in some senses. Trading and battling over the internet was a no-brainer and effectively brought more competitive play to players who didn't have a local scene. Not to mention, the GTS letting players trade Pokemon online was a great way for people to try and bargain for rarer Pokemon they may not have had access to otherwise, and actually complete the darn Pokedex without needing other people with other versions to play with. Probably the biggest feature added to the series, and honestly, it's one of the most important as it pretty much led to the series developing into the juggernaut it remains today. Though a lot of the original games who had these online features don't anymore, they kind of shut down those services. Though don't fret, as there are some modern workarounds to still allow you and the boys to play it like it's 06, if you're interested. Is it bad that whenever somebody talks about 2006, my mind instantly goes there? I know, it shouldn't, but it does, it really does. I guess there's no use, huh? Oh, and lest I forget the new Pokeball types, including some that do extra things like heal your Pokemon, a baker's dozen sort of thing with the Premier Ball, and my personal favorite, Quick Ball, 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 Quick Ball. Why use anything else? It has one of the highest catch ratios of like anything, but only if you use it in the first turn. Probably why they avoided having it in something like Let's Go and the first Legends, because it kind of makes the normal ones like obsolete. It's so broken. The visuals in Diamond and Pearl take on this very interesting 2.5D look, which features a new 3D background with the player characters and other NPCs in 2D, which gives them this very unique look that keeps the same feeling of the original games, while also introducing a unique look that feels like an evolution from the game's 2D roots. And you can really feel that when you get Rock Climb later in the game, almost as if it's flexing that Z axis on us. Look how clean that shit looks! And you know, I'm actually spot on with that, by the way. If you go back and look at old dev interviews, their main concern was really just how accessible the games were for new and returning audiences. And then for the actual battles, well, I hope you like gradients. Like, man alive, I know I grew up with this as a kid, but man, these are just so disappointing when you really stop and think about it. The actual Pokemon sprites themselves look great, and it's nice to see them animated again. But man, like, look at this. Where's the 3D effect here? I'm not asking for like Dragon Quest DS levels of detail, but still. Though again, the sprite detail in comparison to the last 3 gens is great. I love the colors here and how they don't have to wash out everything since we don't have to worry about some players not having a backlight. So, you know, at least things are pretty looking. And we even have more overworld weather effects that were cut from Generation 3, which look really cool, except for fog. I don't care for fog, but we can get there. There is a special type of snow though that happens only on certain days called diamond dust. It's kind of like this thing for like special occasions. You'd have to look up the full list, I can't remember it off the top of my head, but it's really interesting. And there's even some mechanics that only happen within the game during days of great tragedy, like 9/11, where the game decreases random encounters, making those awful days the best ones to speedrun the game through or get a shiny chain going on the radar. I'm not kidding about that, by the way. They knowingly put that in the game. It's a very weird thing to know. I'm not gonna lie to you. So, to make a note on accessibility, that's actually where the bottom screen UI comes in. You know, the reason it's all big, bright colors is not only so kids could, like, who couldn't read, like me, could actually, like, play the game and understand certain things by how moves work, but it was also made that way to, like, draw in attention from the people around you, so they would get interested in the game as well. I was never one for sharing my screen, but hey, if you're on a bus or something, I guess you can make a few friends that way. Though, funnily enough, another reason for the large buttons is because Masuda actually found the idea of the stylus pretty pointless, funnily enough. Not really much of a touchscreen in his eyes if it wasn't made to be mashing stuff with your fingers. Which, hey, fair enough, but that sounds like somebody who never played Ranger, so I don't know, bro. Mashing your digits to get the charge was a real pain after a while, but it worked damn good for this game though. The music for the Sinnoh region is beautiful, using a lot of piano and jazzy horns that I think give it a very unique feel. It's definitely one of my favorite OSTs in video games. I love how the underground theme starts with this sinking feeling, as it actually starts with us falling underground and then going on a bombastic adventure. Battle themes like the iconic champion theme feel larger than life, a true theme for one of the truest champions we'll ever get. And then that same cathedral piano starting to play during certain sections where it really feels like we're summoning a god for our player to battle, which is perfect in the context of the legendary battles in this game. And then we have our more jovial, calming themes, like the music in the towns and routes we get to explore. Jubilife is my favorite video game track of all time. It's so friendly, kind, jovial. It really gives the vibe that Jubilife is a city in constant bliss, like it's Christmas Eve all year long. I love it to death. The only thing that place needed was some snow to fall as we walked around. A great theme for a town that the devs knew would be the most revisited, which is why the GTS and the Poketch developers are here, because they knew you're gonna come back here all the time. Probably should have been where the contest hall was as well, but whatever. If you ever get the chance, there's this orchestrated version of Diamond and Pearl's soundtrack made by Insane in the Rain. God bless. It's beautiful. If you've not heard it, I can't give it a higher recommendation. I love it to death. The Sinnoh region is based on the northernmost region of Japan, Hokkaido, a far more northern, hilly area in comparison to the tropical water-filled Hoenn region, with lots of towns and locations matching up with pretty famous areas in Hokkaido, including the mountain ranges, the port towns, to even the 3 lakes and the famous hidden 4th lake, covered in mystery and fog all year round. Even things like Snow Point Temple have a real-life parallel in the actual real place. It's really cool. So, in case you couldn't already tell, the theme of the Sinnoh games is basically creationism and the many myths of the Pokémon world, with even the name Sinnoh coming from the Japanese words for mysterious and profound. Mount Coronet is the peak of the Pokémon world, and the point where it was all supposedly created. Based on the Great Mount Fuji, the place is given great religious significance in the Sinnoh region, even having a cathedral with a mural painted in its likeness. And the reflection of Mount Fuji in the lakes at its base is actually what gave them the idea of the mirror parallel world of the Distortion world in Pokémon Platinum. We get a lot of religious symbolism in Sinnoh, with of course the introduction of the so-called god of the Pokémon world, Arceus, revealed to be another potential beginning point of this universe. And we even have leaks from Sinnoh's developments that show off early design documents of how the pantheon of Pokemon gods would work in a hierarchy, and included legendaries like Dialga, Groudon, Celebi, as well as Pokemon with really powerful abilities such as pseudo-legendaries and Gyarados, even giving us the Pokemon version of the Big Bang, with Arceus hatching from an egg and battling Titans to create the multiverse. Keep a pin in that Titan thing for later. Obviously, we couldn't really call all this leaked content canonical, but it is interesting to see where their headspace was at after amping up the power scale with Generation 3's literal architects of the world. Groudon built the continents, Kyogre the oceans, and Rayquaza the atmosphere. So now it's time to get vaguer with powers that go beyond our planet, and into the very creation of the universe. Time, space, gravity, matter, antimatter, as well as the emotions, intelligence, and willpower of all sentient beings, even including old storybooks that feature tales of an even older era of the Pokémon world, where man and Pokémon were one and the same until evolving apart from one another. Of course, all this brings up the ideas of the Johto region and its own myths, which is probably one of the many reasons these two regions share so many connections, such as to where the unknown fit into all this with their unique powers, which are revealed to be leftovers from Arceus' creation of the world. They're known as the 1,000 Arms of Arceus, which is so cool. I actually, sort of have like a pretty big interest in things such as angelology and like the study of the holy spheres in Abrahamic religion. It's fun to think about how Arceus is kind of like the Lamb, or the Jehovah-esque godly figure, having all these unknowable creatures following its will, and maybe even appearing to humans in a way that is incomprehensible to them. Be not afraid, as the angels would say in the Bible. I'd love to see some sort of seraphim mode for the many eyes of unknown, but that might be for another time. Sinnoh actually reminds me a lot of my own home in the Appalachian Mountains. Things such as religious traditions, coal mining, dense history and mythology, and of course the large mountainous environments. Probably made me feel right at home as a little pew baby, especially with the piano playing such a large part of the soundtrack. It reminds me a lot of my grandmother, who still plays for it at church every Sunday. I guess I really lucked out with my introduction, huh? Didn't help that I'm a big sucker for snowy weather, though losing a bunch of weight now means I get cold way easier, which super sucks, let me tell you. Though now that I've gained some of the weight back, I still get cold. How does that even work? I don't know. But I think the snow looks so gorgeous on those larger than life mountains. Like it's another world just so out of reach. And let me tell you something, I still get nervous every time I go anywhere without mountains. Like anytime I'm like at a place that's all plains or I'm at the beach, my heart gets nervous not having those things take up like 70% of my sight. Like how do y'all live with such a perfect, uncluttered view of the sky? Ugh, it freaks me out. Though I always get a big grin on my face when I see those hills in the distance, like I'm going back into the safe walls of home. It's protective, I think. Though that does bring me to something else. Masuda called this the ultimate Pokemon game. The perfect world. That kind of brings to mind a certain villain, doesn't it? And oh boy, do I have a lot to say about him. But that's kind of for later. For now, how about them Pokemon? So, after Hoenn pushed the boundaries of what a Pokemon could be, it came time for Sinnoh to follow up things with a little more pizzazz. First things first, we're going back to the beginning, so let's give some divine blessings to the Pokemon who Game Freak thought to be a little incomplete or kind of awkward in their current forms. Pokemon such as Roselia, who kind of always felt like an awkward middle stage, so it was given a pre-evolution and an evolution to round it out. Johto Pokemon, who are just incomplete in comparison to their competition, got sleek new evolutions to buff them up and give them the edge they needed. And of course, the great Kanto couldn't be left out. With Pokemon like Electabuzz and Magmar finally getting their third stages to match their baby forms in Johto. Though, oddly enough, poor Jinx didn't get the memo and their little trifecta's kind of done in, which is so odd. Though now she does share a singular baby form with the other mimicking Pokemon Sudowoodo and Mr. Mime, so hey, that's at least something. And how could we leave out little Eevee? Give that shithead 2 new forms, why not? For the main Sinnoh boys, they were designed to be quite a bit awkward in their beginning stages before getting far more powerful, deadly forms through evolution. As well as the game now taking a chance on form differences, first started with Castform and Hoenn, with some standard Mons and even legendaries gaining the ability to transform into alternate forms, to gain different powers, abilities, or typings. Though some of these would be locked to Platinum, the third version, kinda leaving Diamond and Pearl in an awkward spot. If you actually connect those games and use those newer forms, they're actually just treated like their normal forms in Diamond and Pearl, which obviously is gonna cause some discrepancies. But hey, they at least accounted for it. Playing off the mythical theme, of course our 3 starter boys had to play along, with the Chimchar line taking heavy inspiration on both hot spring monkeys popular in Hokkaido, as well as the ever popular hero of myth, Sun Wukong, aka the entire reason Shonen exists. The Piplup line takes heavy inspiration from Emperor Penguins, while also giving them a French-esque look to play on that powerful tactician, kinda like Napoleon, the one-time Emperor of France, as well as the obvious parallels with its trident and the ocean gods Poseidon and Neptune. And then we have the goat of all goats, my first and my favorite Pokemon of all time, Torterra. Based heavily around terrapins and dinosaurs such as the Ankylosaurus and the Meowlania, with the continent-shaped backside being a direct reference to the story of the world turtle, a popular belief that this world was turtles all the way down till you hit an elephant, but that's only for some people. Which, interestingly enough, wasn't exclusive to one people's culture. Many people across the globe believed this for many coincidental reasons, including the turtles which could grow moss on their backs. See my Kanto video where I explained this with Wartortle and Terapagos. God, I love him. I know, your first being your favorite is as cliche gets, but we're literally digging into my core being with this video, so forgive me if I get sentimental. That being said, this big green beast wasn't actually always my favorite. Sure, he was my go-to starter, but plenty of other Pokemon occupied that spot for years on end. But growing up, it always came back to him, and Pokemon wouldn't be what Pokemon is without my best friend right here to share it with. Ugh, gross, that's so cheesy, I hate it. But usually the cheesiest things are the truest. Ah, the stories I could tell, but I'll save that for later. Though I am gonna throw a tomato at the anime real quick for throwing my man under the bus. I get Chimchar was the fan favorite and you had a storyline going on, but Turtwig was a solid fighter till he had to evolve. Then, instead of forcing Ash to adapt to a new battle style that wasn't speed-based, they gave him L after L, and it was so disappointing after we saw Paul's wreck house throughout the early sagas. How cool would a Torterra versus Torterra fight would have been after Paul's Torterra gave Ash's Torterra those pointers earlier? Come on, it would have been cool. Of course, some other great Mons in here include the mythical Pokemon Shaman, another favorite of mine for a very interesting reason, I think. Before that, let me explain the unique approach to mystery gifts this time around. As Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum weren't just okay with the standard gift Pokemon, no. This time, you had to earn it, taking the player to a few expansionary areas that were unique to new mythical Pokemon. Darkrai, which was the dark counterpart to the main game's Cresselia. The grand designer of the Pokemon world, Arceus, which ironically did get his item and area removed because the devs thought it was too complicated. It's literally the only area of these that you go to in the main game. Why would that be complicated? Anyway, Manaphy, which was actually an egg that you had to get from a mystery gift from an entirely separate game, which was a choice. Of course, this was not repeatable because, F you, but you were able to breed Manaphy with a Ditto to spawn some weird deformed version called Fione, which I actually prefer. I don't know, I just love this unique little cutie. And of course, my goat, Shaman. I actually have a really funny story about this, which I've said a ton of times in like streams and stuff, but I'm gonna say it again here. So when I was a kid, I had one of those action replay things, and I used to do things with it, like get infinite TMs or level up my Mons with infinite rare candies. But I also made liberal use of the walk through walls cheat, which allowed me to view this region in a special way that was completely unknown to me as a kid who could barely use the internet. But because I couldn't, I knew true magic when I found an extra area beside the Elite Four, with all new Pokemon to me like Victory Bell, Weeping Bell, and this strange flower path that felt like it went on for infinity, with a fascinating Pokemon right at its end. Shaman, it was called, and I had never heard of this Pokemon before. And since I made no use of internet forums or anything like that, I would never see this Pokemon outside of my own ventures till the movie like years later after Platinum. So for me, as a kid, it felt like I discovered my own special Pokemon, and it has been special to me ever since. I'm not a big fan on the Skyform. I don't know why. It just doesn't hit for me as much as this little, adorable, literal hedgehog that I discovered. It's a 10 out of 10 Pokemon, okay? Goats of goats. Along with Torterra, Rhyperior, Steelix, and the rest I like. Obviously, it still sucks you can't get these anymore, but there are plenty of workarounds, so I won't sleep about it. Also, why were some Pokétch apps behind mystery gifts? Most already weren't like going out of their way to look for these. Why make more difficult to grab? That's so weird, right? Is it just me? Whatever, it's time for story. Skip here to avoid all story spoilers for Pokemon. Does anyone actually do that? Does anyone ever actually skip? These games are like 15 years old. You played this, come on. So the story begins in the typical Pokemon fashion of a child in their little bedroom with a PC, TV, and a bed. Spoiled little shit if you think about the time period these came out in, but it is actually interesting to see somebody actually, use the TV instead of just not caring about it. And we're actually shown a special program from a reporter talking about the mysterious red Gyarados in the Johto region. Another thing to really tie into those games, as well as show us where this game lines up in the official Pokemon timeline, with Diamond and Pearl and Heart Gold and Soul Silver taking place at relatively the same time. But that also doesn't mean shit anymore, so who cares? Our little buddy canonically known as Barry or Pearl, but for our purposes Marcus, because as a kid I always thought it fit better, barges in and threatens to fine us money if we don't help him explore the nearby lake for a mysterious Pokemon. As we travel there, we run into two back sprites that as a kid, I legit thought were two Pokemon talking to each other, but no, instead it's our latest professor for the game, a man by the name of Rowan who studies Pokemon evolution, and the other gender player character that goes by either Lucas or Dawn. After apologizing for the professors rushing away, we and Marcus see that the dorks left behind their suitcase. The blonde blur goes to retrieve it, but we intervene saying to be careful of wild Pokemon in the tall grass.
Like that'll ever happen.
Of course, ignoring the rules of the world, we are jumped by two wild Starly and quickly have to choose from 3 starter Pokemon in order to defend ourselves. Starting to feel bad about making fun of Birch so much. After a quick battle, Dawn comes in to retrieve the case, but freaks out when she finds that we have used 2 of the Pokemon. I guess she would have rathered we get our eyes poked out. Thanks, woman! We meet back up with the doc, who takes an interest in the relationship between us and the Pokemon, before leaving back to the lab. to the lab again. Don tells us to come visit the lab, but not before we go get a bit of R&R. After that, and getting slammed by Marcus, mind for the slamming, we meet the professor who tells us about his dream of completing the Pokédex, and it wouldn't hurt for him to have some extra help, even letting us keep the Pokémon since we've gained a decent bond with it already. We can of course try to decline the professor's offer, but he won't hear of it. Literally. So we're forced to answer the call of adventure, with Dawn saying she'd have to do something awful if we refuse. Yeah, I'd like to see you try, Miss Would rather us get pecked to death. She also claims that if we had chosen Piplup, we would have had the same Pokemon, but don't fall for that, it changes depending on which starter you and Marcus didn't choose. And I'm sorry to say that as a kid, I fell for it because I thought it'd be cool to share one with her.
So that was a fucking lie.
After getting the grand tour of Sandgem Town, we say goodbye to Mama and are tasked with giving Marcus a package, which turns out to be 2 town maps, with Marcus giving us one and warning us of his reckless goal of becoming the next winner of the Sinnoh League. After some good old-fashioned gym battles, we meet up with the sinister Team Galactic, a group of bowl-cut-headed bums who are trying to get info out of the professor, steal electricity from a wind power plant, and even kidnap Pokemon related to the stars? Okay, like, what kind of evil plan are these jerks even trying to hatch? Well, even they aren't really all that sure, but if it's in service for their main boss Cyrus, or the Czech, they'll do just about anything, and we even get to meet this charismatic boss of Team Galactic. And he's just as vague as the team he surrounds himself with. Also, while checking out the sights in Sinnoh, including the statue of the so-called deity, which actually seems to be a fusion of the 2 box art legendaries, it's actually kind of a trick of the eye kind of sprite, and my one credit I will give to the remakes is that they took the manga route where they actually did keep the spirit of that trick in mind. That's pretty cool. But as we're looking around, we meet, frankly, the best Pokemon character ever made, Cynthia, a powerful trainer who was once on the same journey for the professor that we are on now. Wait, she's already done this. Do we even need to get the Pokedex figured out? Anyway, now she is the champion of the Sinnoh region, and she spends her time as an archaeologist, or at least an amateur one, going from site to site to understand the history of the region she loves. It's just too bad she wasn't included in Hisui. Well, I mean, she was kind of, but that's for another time. After that, we get into the mid-game of Sinnoh, which is such an odd thing for me. One, haha, Safari Zone but muddy, yeah. But also, this area of the game really feels like it was supposed to be similar to like Kanto mid-game. Like here is 3 gyms that are all around the same level, and we have generally free access to each one, except the game tries to railroad things, preventing you from going south, so you have to go east through Maylene and then to Wake. But you can actually fight either one, which is really cool for replay value. But like, why not just let me take the path south and then pick a fight from there? Like, the storyline really wouldn't change that much. You just have to have Dawn meet you after you get your 3rd badge, like no matter which badge it is. And then Barry can come in around like for the 5th badge. I mean, the south route here even has the same levels as the railroaded routes. Like, it would have been so easy to just go non-linear, and it's even a circle like Kanto, but whatever. I'm stupid. Don't ask me. They'll mess this up even more in Platinum, but we can get there. Anyway, after getting our 4th badge, a bomb goes off in the Safari Zone, aka the Great Marsh, and we're sent after the culprit, till Marcus interrupts us, and then the grunt just kinda limps along, refusing to battle us and get this over with. Okay, that's kinda strange. Even stranger is that he's basically just telling us the whole plan out loud for everyone to hear, how he totally has more bombs and it will definitely be used at the lake that's oddly been guarded the last few days. But after he just pisses off for the final time, we finally fight him outside the Incest Cafe, yes that's real, where afterwards we finally meet up with Cynthia, who asks us to do a favor for her, giving us the same super potion used for Amphi and Johto to clear up some Psyduck headaches south of her hometown. Afterwards, she owes us 2, saying that she wants us to take this special charm to her grandmother in Celestic Town. But to get there, we had to get through this very foggy route, which is kind of like a new battlefield weather effect, though we never actually get to make use of it for ourselves. I mean, I understand it's basically a detriment to all parties involved as it just hurts all of our accuracies. But like, we have a whole HM around it. You'd think the fog would be used more. But not that I necessarily would want it to be used more. It kind of would ruin battles. But speaking of, if you can't find where this HM is in the original Diamond and Pearl, it's this girl. Right here, just randomly in the Safari Zone. Yeah, I never found her as a kid either. So now we're chilling up in the not Dragon Clan village, though I could see why you would confuse them. I mean, they do worship ancient dragons, and there's a ton of veterans and dragon tamers around, plus the Draco Meteor Tutor is right over there. But Granny Cynthia, not her, asks us to deal with this crazy-ass galactic grunt who's threatening to blow up the shrine? Jesus Christ, this is getting a little real, isn't it, Game Freak? Of course, by beating him in a battle, I basically show myself as the Chad while he is the lowly virgin. So he runs off, and then Cyrus pulls up and talks about, there's just too much struggle here. I mean, yeah, dude, you ordered a suicide bombing. I mean, feelings of struggle come free with your fucking terror attack. But then Granny is like, I can feel the legendary Pokemon Mesprit watching over us as we gaze as this symbolic mural. And then she gives us the search HM and tells us to head to the next gym. After battling a Calosian kook in her weird addition-based gym puzzle, I guess the French and math are spooky, Cynthia comes by and apologizes for sending us there in her stead before recommending us to check out the library in Canalava, hoping things will go better for our next myth-searching adventure. We surf from Jubilife and make it to Metal Town, fight Barry, and let him crash out as we then head to the nearby island where we meet the not Sir Aaron as he passes on his philosophy while also totally not being jelly about the Steel Gym Leader Byron, not choosing him to take over his old gym in Orberg. I thought we had something special. Okay, yeah, I'm not qualified for this, I'm 10, so. But after trauma dumping on us, he does give us this egg and sends us on our way. Iron Island is actually like my favorite spot to grind in Pokemon and basically any RPG. Like, I get that nobody likes to grind in these things, but I do kind of enjoy it at points. It's sort of relaxing in a way. And Iron Island and the multiple other spots in Sinnoh are actually good for this as you get to team up with multiple trainers throughout the game, though we'll talk about them more in a bit. After a gym battle against the deadbeat Steel Gym Leader, we go into the library to read some bestiality myths when the OG and our two rivals, asterisk, sit us down and tasks us with a new mission to travel to the 3 lakes across the Sinnoh region, to research the legendary Pokemon Azelf, Mesprit, and Uxie when BOOM! A large quake shakes the world, and we walk out to see a sailor tell us that one of the lakes was just bombed by the Galactics. Oh no, if only we were warned about this exact thing happening. Ooh. We split up to look for clues and check on the 3 different lakes, where we encounter some poor Magikarp, my god, as well as the admins of Team Galactic. Wait a minute, is this another reference to Johto? Shit, it is, isn't it? Anyway, after defeating the right-hand man, Saturn, yeah, that's a boy, it's actually quite a common mistake to get his gender wrong, we also come into contact with Dawn and Marcus, who weren't so lucky in their battles with their admins, with Marcus even vowing to go get stronger. But while he's on his training arc, we pull up to Galactic HQ where we meet up with Cyrus. Finally, we hash things out through a battle, and after losing, he's actually quite amicable, even allowing us to head in there and free the legends he captured at the lakes. He's gotten what he needs, so there's really no need to contain them anymore, so, just go ahead. Which, speaking of legendary containers, he also just gives us the Master Ball? Thanks, man, that's really nice. Though this does come with a comment about how much he despises our sentimentality. He finds it irrational and it makes him mad. Though he'd never be able to admit it because of his whole anti-emotional thing. After freeing the legends, it's actually Cyrus's right-hand man Saturn who lets us in on his true plans taking place at the summit of the Great Mount Coronet. Though he himself admits that he's actually not very sure what Cyrus's true ambitions are. Well, after using our many HMs to scale the Great Mountain, we have one more battle with the Galactics, with even a returning Marcus coming in to assist, leading things to a climactic scene as Cyrus uses the red chain he crafted from the jewels of the Lake Trio, or maybe they're like teeth and claws. Was that a metaphor in Arceus? I was a little confused. Either way, he summons the legendary Pokemon to his side, either Dialga or Palkia depending on your version, who then use their powers of the very foundations of our universe to cause quite the scene the world over, bending the very pillars that lay atop of the holy site of Spear Pillar.
Nothing beats a Jet 2 holiday.
Mommy? Cyrus then prepares to begin his reconstruction of the entire universe. This time, however, without emotion, without willpower, and without knowledge. And of course, the guardians of that stuff don't care for that. The Lake Trio, Mesprit especially, comes to our aid, halting the legendary Pokemon's rampage with their own legendary power. And after battling a furious Cyrus who is livid his rise was prevented by some child and his goofy friends, he claims to return once he has regained his composure and has rebuilt his chain of red, which in the anime takes the shape of Arceus's little hula hoop, which is actually really cute. But then Cyrus leaves, and we never see him again. Well, after that, it's time to wrap up this venture. With the blackout of Sunny Shore finally being cleared up, we finally get to head towards the eastern edge of the region. Here we're met by the trio of friends, Vulcaner, the city's gym leader, Flint, an Elite Four member, odd to see one of those out of the league, and oddly still, Jasmine on vacation from Johto, hoping to see her two childhood friends. But old Vulcaner is pretty down in the dumps. Not only has his beloved city of Sunnyshore, a paradise of solar panels, recently had a major problem with its power, which is already embarrassing for an electric gym leader, but the man is completely bored at his post. The last few challengers have been nothing but rookies and flunkies, and if he doesn't get a real challenge, then he's never gonna get out of his own blackout. Flint and Jasmine need our help to light his spark back, and we do just that, earning us our final badge and our challenge to the Pokemon League. After another victory road and one more challenge from fresh off his training arc Marcus, it's time for the finale. Beginning with Aaron, a cocky young trainer. No, not Aaron. It's a different Aaron. I get the confusion. Aaron, a cocky young trainer with a lot to prove, and that's definitely true, as you'd never see another trainer with his league ranking exclusively use bug Pokemon. And don't be looking down on some early route monsters, because Aaron is all about showing off their true strength. Don't sleep on them, or they'll put you to sleep. Next up is Bertha, my ground-type grandma who's a sturdy earth battler with lots of experience battling the best of the best. And she also may be related to Agatha of the Kanto Elite Four. Not because they're both old ladies, no, it's actually 2 games after this, Black and White and Legends Arceus, that make the connection with Chantal actually mentioning it to the player character, and both of their ancestors' charm is in Legends, who carries 2 of their ace Pokemon, which is actually pretty neat. Flint, yeah, this hothead from before, is here to battle, and you can guess what he uses, right? Well, wrong! He is a subscriber of telling your opponent you use one type, and then countering the shit out of them with a whole nother Pokemon. Him and Vulcaner both are hilarious for just having Pokemon that counter their main type weakness. Like, lying to your opponent is some serious Sun Tzu shit. And also, I really love how they parallel each other's teams in Platinum. It's kind of too bad Jasmine never got the memo, but it is really cool. Lucian, the wise guy who loves books and psychic-type Pokemon. He's fairly by the numbers for a psychic-type user, you know, being really intelligent and all that. But it is interesting that he's the first character to specialize in that typing that doesn't seem to have any sort of powers himself. Not that he needs them, of course, and I'd be very careful if I was you, because Lucian is the prime example of not judging a book by its cover. And of course, how could we forget Champion Cynthia? A legend among legends. The image that comes to mind when Pokemon Champion is even uttered in a sentence. Stylish, graceful, intelligent, confident, and has a tactical nuke on speed dial? Cynthia is probably, no. Cynthia is the best champion in the series. She's like certainly my favorite. She probably has the most character of like any champion, and most of that is down to us meeting and greeting her a lot throughout the game. I mean, we did as well with characters like Steven before, but not until the more modern games do we really get to know the champion before we battle them. And spending time with Cynthia, we learn so much about her. Her interests, her family, and of course, unlike some other champions, she does pull the fuck up for the final battle with the main bad guy. Even kinda acting like she knew Cyrus, like personally, that's interesting. But you wanna know what makes her stand apart from any champion so far? Her fight is incredible. Like, it's 10 out of 10. Starting off with Spiritomb, a Pokemon with no weaknesses till 2 generations later. That's crazy. Extra crazy because if you were like me as a kid, you definitely thought that this super rare Legion Pokemon was absolutely some sort of lower tier legendary. With its defense and the ability to deny your use of items, it's pure evil. Then after that monstrosity, we have some of her major hitters. Roserade, which is a fantastic Pokemon with a large variety of powerful moves to beat you down, while also whittling away at you with poison. Lucario, who's basically the same, but with nasty old Aura Spear, Psychic, Dragon Pulse, Earthquake, it just hits everything hard. Gastrodon, who's Loki slept on as a member of her team, being another bulky Pokemon to help drain your Pokemon with pot shots and poison. So if you somehow got through Roserade, you're not safe from that yet. Cynthia uses stall tactics. How is Cynthia a better stall poison user than the girl from Scarlet and Violet? Come on. Milotic, who I swear to God is the real ace in most of her teams, because oh my god, Aqua Ring with that HP stat as well as multi-scale, that thing hits Blizzard far too often for my tastes. And who gave her Mirror Coat? That thing is Morgan Wallace's excuse for a lungfish. But then the ace, Garchomp. Ugh. That thing, I called it a tactical nuke earlier, that's just what it is. It one-shots you 99% of the time, especially if you brought them bum-ass legendaries with you. It is a beast of a Pokemon that has scarred many a child, myself included, giving Cynthia this air of superiority that you will need to overcome if you want to beat this game. Man, some of my battles with her over the years are probably some of my most memorable in the series. Her Garchomp versus my Torterra, Woodhammer versus Dragon Rush, Earthquake into her Dig for double damage. She even followed my lead in healing our aces in the middle of our match so we could go round 2. Ugh, my heart, man, I love it. Everything about this battle is perfect. The music is awe-inspiring, the location is wonderfully grandiose, the team is the heaviest of hitters, and Cynthia herself is perfect. I don't know anybody who could fault Alder for trying to hit her up in Black and White's anime. She's the whole package. Cynthia is the perfect Pokemon champion because there is no question that she stands at the peak of all trainers in that region. Though, if you do need some advice on how to beat her, I've actually done it enough times to let you in on a secret. Avalanche. Yeah, you know that TM Candace gave you that's just an Ice-type payback? Well, that SOB makes a BITCH out of that geeked up gecko if you manage to survive one of its hits. Honestly, same girl, my ace also has a mad matchup with Ice. It's actually why so many of her rematches that are kinda harder are basically just her trying to remedy that issue. So be smart and put that move on a Bulkymon or a good physical attacker to make Garchomp a non-issue. Also, if you got Reflect, Light Screen, or Aurora Veil up, that may be a good way to bait her into using Brick Break instead of one of her stronger attacks, helping your survivability. Though, this won't work in games where she doesn't carry that move like in Platinum. For Spiritomb, I like to set up on it. As scary as it is, the poor thing cannot one-shot to save its life. Roserade and Lucario are great in offense, but piss poor defensively, being weak to some of the more common mons in the game. I hardly ever have trouble from those two. But these two dorks are something else. Gastrodon is easily beaten by a good grass move, but if you don't got one, of course, you can probably still run Grass Knot on somebody. That slug is heavy as lead, so that move should just do the job. Milotic is Cynthia's hidden killer. Most times, this thing will thin your team before the shark even gets out, so be cautious around it. If you use grass-type moves, it will spam Blizzard, and if you use electric, be prepared to have that shit reflected right back at you. And with Marvel scale, status moves are a no-go, my friend. So personally, I like to whittle her down with some neutral damage. Normal, fighting, things like that. If you have a Mon that doesn't directly counter something else on her team, use it to knock this sorry lungfish around and then finish it off with something stronger. Funny how Feebas's Evo just inverts its ugliness to be on the inside, which in my experience is way worse. In case you're worried about other games, that Togetic can be a pain with Serene Grace flinching and confusion, not to mention Aura Spear for rock and ice types, but if you got some stealth rocks up on Spiritomb, then I think you can manage it like any other bird from there. She does tend to use a few other Mons from time to time, but I won't be going over all possible rematches, this is just for your base playthrough. But after winning, you're taken up the cool elevator to put you and your team into the Hall of Fame. Meeting up with Rowan on the way, who reminisces with Cynthia about how he recorded herself in here not so long ago. Coming full circle with Rowan's old and new assistants becoming Sinnoh champions. And then after that, we take a nice, slow, peaceful bike ride home and lay down for a nice nap before getting shook awake by Marcus, cause it's post-game time, baby! Including a whole new island on the corner of the region, which also may be technically our first Russian Pokemon region, so that's interesting. Wait, is this what that guy from Kanto was on about? Anyway, it includes plenty of new Pokemon to capture, a post-game micro story with Flint's brother that allows you to capture the legendary Heatran, and features the returning battle tower manned by Marcus's absent father, Palmer. So much is explained in so little time. We also get to explore the secret fourth lake of the Sinnoh region, as well as its link to the underworld and the shadowy third god, Giratina. Then we meet up with good old Professor Oak, who gives us the national dex to catalog all these new Pokemon, though you need to have at least seen every Mon in the regional deck, so get ready to rematch a few random trainers to see some of the guys you couldn't have earlier. But he does invite us to the PAL Park, where we can transfer our Pokemon from the Generation 3 games using the GBA slot on the DS. This is a really cool hardware feature to make use of, by the way. I really like how they done this here. And you can even use it for more stuff, as when you get the Poke Radar, you can use it alongside that to get even more exclusive Pokemon depending on what Game Boy game you have plugged in. Oh, and we also got another not legendary in Rotom. But damn, that's a lot of stuff, right? But hold on. Let's go back to the plot. The story for Diamond and Pearl is good. Yeah, not really great in my opinion, and it comes down to a few things. I'm not really in love with our rival, Marcus, Barry, Pearl, whatever. Their gimmick of bumping into me obviously wasn't as annoying as Silver since it's unintentional, and he's basically just an ADH kid trying to rush his way to the top. But I'm not too sure about the whole trying to swindle me out of a small fortune thing. It's a little odd. I mean, Masters EX came out later to like explain that so he can buy his own battle tower to match his dad, which is a cool bit of lore, but why does this gacha game have to be the one to bear the burden of explaining all the oddities of the series? Why can't that be like a plot point or something he tells us, right? Marcus getting humbled by Jupiter is actually a really interesting thing, because it's supposed to slow him down and try to make him take things more seriously. Mr. Level 26 Starly. And that is a good direction to go for his character, because in the beginning of the game, his reckless nature was what got us attacked by the Starly. And by the end, he's a lot more serious, and we even have a nice talk before we're able to battle the Elite Four. But after that, he's just back to his old self in the post-game. You know, I would have really liked to see more development on this part of his character, but the game doesn't really take the time to delve into it, which disappoints me. Maybe his drive to reach new heights is because of his father, you know, that's a pretty big chip on his shoulder. It's very similar to Gary in the originals, both of them actually being quite boastful about their abilities and having similar names, as well as having a famous father figure. And then after losing so many times to us and then Jupiter, it could really shake Barry up. And then he could like lock in, you know, to say the least, but he kind of does, that even stopping himself from bumping into us at one point, which was a cool development. But like, otherwise, I don't know. I see the vision with Barry, but the execution could have been a bit more thorough. Dawn/Lucas, the professor's assistant, is also supposed to be a rival of sorts, with us meeting them throughout the game, but like, I think they were an unnecessary addition. Think like May and Ruby and Sapphire, but no battles, which is so odd. Like, the only thing of note I can even say about them is when they got their deck stolen by Team Galactic, and we had to go help them get it back. In fact, the only times we get close to a battle with them is when we're assisting them in a multi-battle with the evil team. And honestly, I think these moments just would have been better had they been given to Barry instead. Like, let it be his impatience that gets him in trouble with the Galactics and we have to bail him out, letting him to gain some more development instead of whatever that little stint was with Crasher Way. I don't know, like, I get lore-wise why he does it, but it doesn't feel like it helps his character at all. Dawn really could have been removed from the plot and nothing would have changed, so why not develop Barry / Marcus / Pearl some more? And then we get to my main issue with the plot. Cyrus. Yeah, get your pitchforks and your torches. I'm not a fan of the main antagonist of my favorite game. Okay, so what is Cyrus's deal? Cyrus is the head man behind Team Galactic, a group said to be looking for an alternative energy source in the Sinnoh region. Or at least that's the cover for a secret organization that actually goes around stealing away and murdering people's Pokémon, as well as siphoning energy from already established power sources such as the Valley Windworks, and potentially even Sunnyshore, but I'm not too sure on that one. Afterwards, they are caught committing various terrorist acts on public officials, religious monuments, and even kidnapping and torturing the very gods themselves, forcing the divine wielders of space and time into the mortal plane in order to fuel their leader's ambitious goal of a hard reset on the universe, in order to build it back in said leader's image. A world devoid of emotion and focused only on cold, hard logic, with Cyrus as its one true god. And you know, it's actually pretty ironic that this goal is fairly unknown by the majority of the Galactics, because a lot of them actually joined for how much they love Cyrus. And this even includes the 3 admins, 4 if we count Platinum, under Cyrus's leadership. Most of them are just here for the money or the idolization of Cyrus. And you know, that's pretty wild, isn't it? I mean, this level of ambition is frankly impressive, right? Even thousands of years earlier, when this twink tried a similar plan himself, he never got as close as Cyrus did, nor did he have the drive or conviction to get half as far. This storyline for a Pokemon game is some crazy next level stuff. It is truly a very fascinating direction to take the series in, focusing on concepts farther beyond this singular world. What is the earth, sea, and skies, even the future and past, in comparison to the unending, seemingly infinite universe? And more importantly, what would drive a mortal man to do this? No, seriously, what? Like, do you know? Do I know? Does anyone know? How about you in the back? Yeah, you, the squeaker.
Was it Cyrus, like, bullied or something?
Well, okay, so yeah, it's kind of that. In the original Diamond and Pearl, we actually didn't receive any reasoning for Cyrus's motivations. That wouldn't be till Platinum, where we get some hint to his backstory with his grandfather in the postgame, which, funnily enough, was actually Lucian's grandpa in the original games, but they switched it up. Other than that, this one NPC mentioning how he regretted not rescuing Cyrus from his troubled childhood, we don't really know anything about Cyrus. I mean, we know his parents were perfectionists that never showed an ounce of approval, except for his very best. And the other kids didn't really like him very much, and instead he kind of like preferred to sit alone, working on machines and toys. And then as an adult, he is completely baffled by emotion, and thinks they are the main cause of all suffering. Seeing the same torment instilled by his superficial parents and the childish bullies of his youth in everyday conflicts surrounding the globe. If only they could realize how frivolous it all is, he thinks to himself. And with all that pent-up anger from his youth, he pushes forward, earning enough notoriety and funds from his enterprises to fund a literal war with the gods who made such a selfish world. That's actually really cool, and I can see how on paper this is enough for some people. But a lot of that was exaggeration on my part, and also about 2 to 12 years of hindsight once the animated shorts and the mangas came in to like fill in the missing blanks. In the actual games themselves, Cyrus is just very vague, and let's be real, quite pissy, which by definition means arrogantly argumentative. And what better word describes Cyrus? It really is his way or the highway. And with nothing but sycophants and fangirls to accompany him his whole way to the top, of course anything that doesn't immediately affirm his own beliefs is inherently wrong, which I'm certain would be reflected perfectly by his parents' attitude if we ever had the chance to meet them. But no, in the game, he's basically just babbling nonsense to whoever is there to listen, and he acts baffled if you don't already agree with him. With a lot of hindsight and context, Cyrus is an odd man in the original games, and if we're being extra real, it's not much better in Platinum. Obviously, we'll go over it in more detail later, but for now, a lot of people seem to have this Mandela effect about Cyrus and the distortion world. In case you're unaware, in the Platinum version, Cyrus manages to summon both Dialga and Palkia, but his plans are thwarted by the third legend I mentioned before, Giratina, sucking him and us into the monster's domain. A mirror to our world that's strange and twisted, and most of all devoid of all the aspects that represent the Lake Trio. Willpower, knowledge, and emotion. Basically a world with no humanity. And in the animated shorts that came out in the later 2010s, they showed a version of Cyrus who was completely fine with this turn of events. Sure, he didn't get to remake the world, but Giratina's domain is basically as devoid as things get, but in the actual games themselves, Cyrus is furious at this chain of events, even planning on bending Giratina to his will and going right back to the OG plan. And when he is unable to, he tries to manipulate the player, telling them to fight or capture Giratina because that will destroy the universe. Before Cynthia steps in and says, no, that's stupid, and then Cyrus just gets mad and walks off, and then we just never see him again. At the end of both games, Cyrus's story ends with him getting frustrated and isolating himself away from the players and even his own team. We don't even know if he's still in the distortion world at the end of Platinum. He clearly wasn't into this. I think some of the aspects me and a lot of other people really enjoy about Cyrus almost exclusively come from the expanded material, where he seems to either win in some sort of way, or he realizes his plans were stupid and has a big redemption arc, coming to understand just how selfish he was acting. His plans weren't to fix the world, he ultimately just wanted to control it, and he saw his team as nothing but pawns to him. According to a leak from the 2023 Giga Leak, we know that plans for Cyrus's aloof nature came from some of his design documents, with him being planned to be written as if he was on the autism spectrum. This possibly explaining his issues with understanding emotions at times, as well as not falling in step with the people around him. Probably being something close to what the series creator, Satoshi Tajiri, faced with his own experiences, the series creator confirming in interviews that he himself falls on the spectrum. Of course, any analysis on this can be dubiously stated to be canon to the in-game descriptions of Cyrus, as we have never gotten any official confirmation by Tajiri or anyone else on the design team if he actually does or not. And also, I feel it is pertinent to mention that being on the autism spectrum doesn't make somebody an emotionless drone of a human being, like some stereotypes typically depict. Nor does it make them ill-fit to be in society and need some sort of stupid cure like some snake oil salesman would say. Instead, it is more of a difference of processing said emotions, with some cases being worse than others when it comes to feeling and understanding them, which can cause a disconnect between them and a more neurotypical world. Obviously, not saying it's impossible or anything ridiculous like that. A difference of thinking isn't an inherent problem, nor is it some sort of disease to be rid of. It's just different, and that's not bad. It just makes some things easier and some things a bit more difficult. If we were to analyze Cyrus through this lens, then I think it could be stated that he does share some depictions of hyperfixation and a feeling of general disconnect between him and the people around him. How does this lead to him wanting to become a god of the whole new universe? I don't know, okay? Like, Cyrus suffers from a common problem in Pokemon. Good ideas, poor execution. But I think I've beat that ponyta enough. Instead, I want to talk about how much I kind of understand Cyrus. Now, hold on, let me cook for 5 minutes. When I was younger, I had a lot of trouble connecting to others around me. Hell, I probably still do. I've grown up a lot in recent years, but I know that pain. I was damn near mute most of my life, and there were days when doubt drowned my mind. I remember begging to God with my hands clasped together in prayer to fix what was ever wrong with me. To save me. And he never did. I came out of that working and pushing myself to new levels. Instead of believing in a higher power constantly judging my every move, I now poured that belief into myself. So I get Cyrus not understanding the people around him, and even feeling abandoned by them, coming to the conclusion that emotions are the problem, the thing he just can't seem to grasp. Deluding himself into thinking that he is completely without emotion, that it was beneath his rational reasoning, and that made him worthy of killing and dethroning the world's god. Take out that last part about becoming God, and I can see a lot of myself, trying to blame what you can't always connect to as the main problem in the world. But even the most rational of thinking is full of emotion. At the end of the day, humans are salt, meat, and nerves in a calcium suit, just trying to make sense of the universe. I know that Pit very well, brother, and I've seen the cracks in his image with his different outbursts at the player, and the fact that he cared so much about his Pokemon, it allowed it to evolve to fight better for him. Brother, you talking to me is like preaching to the choir, but you yourself are without verses. And you know, I think I can fix them. Hear me out. Fishing trip, quart of corn liquor, a Lego Death Star in the box, the good one, and a copy of MCC with 2 controllers. I'd have his shit fixed in a weekend. I've come to appreciate Cyrus a lot as I've gotten older, especially now that I'm nearing his age and watching this world just get stupider and stupider with time. You want to know what's made me a far more confident author when I'm writing my books? Oh, it's easy. Turning on the news and seeing shit that would have been called unrealistic had I wrote it into a book. Like, it's crazy. But to get back to Cyrus, I understand on such a visceral level, it hurts. But his story lacks meat. It's a cake that's only frosting. A steak dinner made up of only potatoes and a half-eaten roll. It needed more, and frankly, on a deeper evaluation of the game's themes and storytelling, I'm a little surprised Cynthia has no role in his story. Like, yeah, we get a few parts where they interact here and there, but the guy was about to blow up your grandmother's house. You sure you don't want to fight him, Miss Champion? Also, both of you are very interested in the myths and legends of the Sinnoh region, and their dialogue at least felt to me like there was some sort of familiarity. Not to mention, most of their names in like different languages translate literally to sun and moon, giving them an intentional connection. Cynthia at least knew about Team Galactic some time before the game started. I wonder if maybe we could have expanded on both of their stories by like having them attend the same school of study on Sinnoh's myths. Or better yet, have Cyrus be another one of Rowan's assistants, kind of like we're told Cynthia was when she was younger, but make Cyrus a failed Pokédex holder of sorts. Maybe Cynthia had a bit of a mean streak and was pretty harsh to Cyrus, which contributed to him slinking away from the world and causing him to dwell on things by himself, making him so envious as Cynthia goes on to be a world-famous trainer. And then as adults, Cynthia feels awful about this, but like can't find Cyrus to apologize, or maybe she can't work up the nerve, only doing so at the tail end of the galactic conflict. But it's too late. And that's why we fight him instead of her. Maybe have a post-game venture where a now reformed Cyrus works alongside the League to use his galactic corporation to actually find better energy sources, or help the planet. Or at least help the people that are kind of like him that are having trouble fitting in.
And then Cynthia, feeling the player has more than earned the title of champion, surpassing her and helping her find the nerve to apologize to her friend. Diamond will always be a special game to me. My introduction to this genre of video games pretty much fully enveloping me as a lifelong Pokemon fan, and ultimately a core pillar of who I am as a person. Is that weird? Yeah, but the region of Sinnoh and its characters will always hold a special place in my heart for good reasons. And frankly, some more personal ones that I didn't even get to get into because this video is just a behemoth. And I'm gonna be honest, I may be sharing too much in these videos. I want you guys to see me as Chubby. The real me, let him stay behind the screen. But Pokemon Diamond will probably remain my favorite game for the foreseeable future. Even if I could readily admit that its better version came out a year later. I think it's about time we get to him, huh? Thanks for everything, Diamond. I'll always love you. Also, Pearls, there, I guess.
With hundreds of Pokémon to catch, battle, and trade, prepare for one of the most exciting Pokémon adventures yet. An epic new journey awaits you. Pokémon Platinum, rated E for everyone.
So, in typical Pokemon fashion, why release one finished project when we can wait a year or so and release a definitive edition with all the stuff we already had planned? It worked pretty good the last 4 times, didn't it? Well, guess what? It worked here too. Pokemon Platinum, the third version of the Diamond and Pearl that added so much to it that it still surpasses the game's remakes to this very day. Adding a number of gameplay features, story elements, and even a new coat of paint to flesh out the world of Sinnoh in a new way but on the same screen. Releasing in Japan in September 2008 and everywhere else in 2009, selling about as much as its earlier versions as well as garnering the same stellar scoring from most outlets. As mentioned before, the game had numerous features added to it, including a brand new visual look to a lot of Sinnoh's routes and towns, helping them feel a lot more distinct from one another instead of sharing the same mountain forest tile set that littered most of the game's areas. I love you, Diamond, but come on. We got new types of trees, rock colors, and things like actual magma and smog in the volcano area. Why wasn't that in the originals? Our main trio of characters also got new designs matching the far colder climate of this game's revamped Sinnoh. And the new locations and areas were added, including the long-awaited return of the Battle Frontier, as well as a small cave indented into dungeons to hide the returning Reggie trio in the post-game. Though they wouldn't be the only returning Pokemon, as Platinum added a major addition in available Pokemon to the delight of everyone who was bothered by Sinnoh's lacking type variety, as well as being able to use some of the new evolutions without waiting till post-game, even including a few new forms for legendary Pokemon Shaman and Giratina, as well as Rotom, who is now able to make use of his motor name as he'll animate different household appliances to gain new stats, special moves, and even their elemental typings in Gen 5 onwards. Though, unfortunately, this is another mystery gift specific area, but there is some ways to get it nowadays if you look online. The online compatibility got some big ups with the new Wi-Fi arena added to the downstairs portion of the Pokemon Center. I've actually never gotten to use this feature, but I've heard the parades were kind of neat, so check that out on YouTube if you're interested. And if you're a 2009 PokeTuber, you absolutely made use of the new Versus Recorder, which saved a copy of your online battles without the downtime of picking options, making it way easier to rewatch your favorite battles or pinpoint the exact moment your Salamence got outplayed by Cousin Ed's Weavile for the 80th time in a row. Guess who's getting sent to the bench this draft season, asshole? Oh, and Spin Trade was added, so players could trade eggs, but only through like a gambling mechanic. Okay. Also, this was the last game to actually feature gambling as a feature inside the North American releases for these games. Sorry, you'll have to go to the real slots to get your fix now, kids. Or just play sports games and gacha, I guess. Wait a minute. Some more adjustments were made to the UI and menus, as well as to the Pokétch, which not only received a new look and some new apps, but also a second button to go back instead of having to spamming forward until you've wrapped around to the one you actually want. We've added new accessories to dress up your Pokemon with. The Amity Square got a bit more inclusive with more starters than just Torchic being allowed in, as well as a new feature that lets you look around and find hidden areas. Pokemon now have a different look when entering into battle and new back animations as well to tie things together, though some of the new ones are just the in-between sprite from Diamond and Pearl, which looks so okay for others, but for some it's just kind of awkward, like Starly here, who's just, hey asshole, I'm over here. What, did you see a rapper or something, you stupid bird? The storyline for Platinum's got a few additions and a few improvements. For one, Cyrus gets plenty of new scenes to build up his machinations and showing how he's able to control the cult of personality that is Team Galactic, all without actually telling them his true goals nor his motivations. And that's still pretty disappointing. All these new scenes without any new developments? Yeah, I don't know, man. Not what I would have hoped for, you know? But hey, at least we got his grandpa in the postgame, I guess. Sharon is a new admin added to Cyrus's roster of recruits, and unlike the rest, he's much more conniving, and doesn't even really do his own battling. Instead, he waits in the wings, doing nothing while waiting for Cyrus's plans to fail, so he can take over Team Galactic, and fulfill his own goals of stealing the Magma Stone, and capturing Heatran, the something prophet, I guess, I don't know. But before he can do that, he gets jabbed in the gut by a Krogunk, owned by the other new character. But we'll get there, because Charon, right? Charon, named after Pluto's moon, which is large enough to rival its orbiting planet, but isn't considered a planet itself, which is funny and a good name for Charon, because this guy is such a nothing burger character, even compared to the other admins. Even the manga exclusive Chad Uranus is cooler. Charon doesn't do anything but sort of plan in the background and act like Starscream, thinking he's a better leader than Cyrus, but unlike Starscream, he's not charming or funny or anything. Even the other characters aren't even sure why he's here, and the parts of Team Galactic he does recruit just buzz off after 5 seconds, because obviously, why would you follow him? And yes, before you comment, I know Charon's name in Japan is Pluto, but it still works if you consider it an exoplanet or whatever. Another thing that's wasted on Charon is this really neat connection with Rotom that absolutely should have just been given to Cyrus instead. So in the Rotom room in Platinum and Heart Gold and Soul Silver for some reason, there are 2 different notebooks. One is newer, and we know for sure it's Charon's, as it details his research on a certain Pokemon called Rotom, and it tells about its strange abilities and kind of acts like a tutorial for how Rotom works for the player, and even how its new forms work if they interact over the internet with their earlier Gen 4 titles, and then just kind of signs off with Charon stroking himself off for what a genius he is for discovering this, but he ends his journal short with just half his name signed in it, either because he was pulled away for a mission, or, in my own headcanon, somebody caught him doing this and explained that Rotom's forms have been common knowledge since Hisui. Don't ask how a fridge was in the Middle Ages, we'll get there. So Charon just gets mad and tosses it aside because he doesn't get the credit like a little piss baby he is. Now, the other notebook is way more interesting. It's quite a bit older and describes a child playing with his toy robot, when an unidentified Pokemon playfully starts to inhabit the toys, and the two begin to form a friendship. The boy actually naming the monster Rotom, acting as if he had discovered it. The two became fast friends and genuine partners until one day the boy played a bit of a prank on Rotom, which caused it to fire off electricity in surprise, accidentally hurting the child. When he woke up, that Rotom was nowhere to be found. He searched high and low for the Pokemon, blaming himself for losing his friend. And that is until he searches the town dump, where he finds his now animated toy, who he then hugs, cherishing the return of his friend, who he hopes will remain with him for the rest of their lives. Now, we don't know exactly who wrote this journal. It's just attributed to Charon in most wikis because of its proximity to the other journal, but that doesn't really make any sense, as in Charon's, it reads about him happening upon all this information about Rotom, which he found in an older journal and began testing with Rotom's powers afterwards. But that brings up, whose journal was it, and where did he find it? Well, I and most people tend to believe that that journal is Cyrus's, detailing a lone child that played with machines and toys growing up who had trouble connecting with his peers. That's like the only thing we know about that man. Not to mention, Sharon seems to hold no reverence for Rotom in his journal, treating it only as something he can be rewarded for. The two journals have to be written by two different people, with child Cyrus being the most likely author. The only thing missing now is, one, how did Sharon get this? But like, honestly, he seems like the type to check people's underwear drawer for loose change, so I can kind of see him swiping it from Cyrus's office. But that brings up two. If this was Cyrus who had a connection to Rotom, what happened? Obviously, he doesn't own one, nor does he ever allude to or mention a Rotom in any shape or form. So did something happen? Did his parents find out and force the Pokemon away? Did a change in Cyrus's personality turn him cold and Rotom left him again? Or did the Pokemon just randomly leave at some point, which pushed Cyrus down this path? We have no idea, but they had to have taken the time to put something like this in the game for some reason. But instead, it's kind of just tied into the Charon stuff, like we had to invent him just to give Rotom forms. God, wouldn't it have been fascinating if Cyrus had wrote and done the research on it, and then when you have a Rotom in your team, he pulls an N from Black and White 2 and is like, oh, so you're with him now? I mean, that would be crazy stuff. Imagine the character potential from something like that. I'd go as far as to say the crash out would be justified. If I had a Pokemon partner, a best friend through thick and thin, basically family, who was forced away from me and I never saw them again? Bro, summoning gods wouldn't even be my final step. Eternal torment for all would be the punishment. That would be a horror, to say the least. But no, screw it. Here's Charon getting cucked at not Mount Chimney or whatever. Also, yeah, I didn't mention Regigigas earlier. There's Regigigas. He's really cool. I like him a lot. Really weird they didn't add the Galar Regis to the remake. Secret policeman from Interpol, Looker. The fan favorite gets his first starring role in the main and post-game plot for Pokemon Platinum, introducing himself to us and Lucas by creeping on them and asking the two children to call him a looker. Not the way I'd recommend a grown man to introduce himself, but he also goes the full mile to make sure that they also keep him in touch with the goings-on about Team Galactic. I'm sure he just meant that in a way like he'd expect all trainers to hear about Pokemon thieves, but we end up going the extra mile and beating them with Looker coming in too late to really help most of the time. Though I guess he does have a moment or two in the narrative, like that time he was gambling instead of doing his job. Based. Apparently some people on the team were big fans of Doctor Who at the time, so they just kind of wanted to add him to the game as this bumbling police officer who kind of resembled him. You know, I don't really understand it, but I'm also not a Doctor Who guy, naming my day Olga TARDIS withstanding, so I don't really know what that's about. I will say though, although Looker becomes one of the very few recurring characters in the series, he really doesn't get much to do till the X and Y post-game, where he's genuinely the best part of that story. So we'll have to wait for more of his peak moments, but hey, gotta give it to the man. At least he's consistent at being late. That's something for him. There are some more additional moments to flesh out the region with more appearances from certain gym leaders outside their gyms, including Maylene, who's freezing her ass off to go meet her girlfriend Candace, which is really cute and all, but like, she's a fashion designer. How is she letting you go out in the tundra with no shoes or a coat? There ain't no Shiori gonna protect you from freezer birds, sister. They also make the middle section of this game more linear by forcing you to battle Maylene before Wake, and it's like, why? No, really, why? Why even let me go to Pastoria if I can't fight him first anymore? And also, I get that Fantina was kind of awkwardly placed between Celestic Town and Canalava, but I think forcing you to fight her first before the other two just kind of makes this part of the game feel like a straight line when, like I said before, the three could have just been optional in how you fought them, and that would have just been way better. I mean, Defog and Strength are now giving it more thematic locations that are still kind of off the beaten path, but aren't just given away by some chick in the marshlands, which is nice. I've always liked it when games give you a motivation to explore the side areas, though I really do hate fog, and although I I think it's annoying, it being a fun parallel to Flash and Dark Cave in Kanto is admittedly kind of cool, and finding it at the bottom of the Salacion ruins really lets us appreciate how special this location is, while also giving us a vital item for our quest. Sorry, Lost Tower, I guess I found the strength to move on, huh? Huh? Yeah, it's probably not appropriate. I'm sorry, Kirby, I didn't mean it. But you know, like Emerald before it, we also get a lot of added final climactic set pieces at the end of the game, with Cyrus and company reaching to the very top of the mountain, using the red chain forged from the suffering of the Pokémon encapsulation of humanity. I wonder if that's a metaphor. Refantasio. And using them to not just summon one deity of the universe, but two. This is getting out of hand. Now there's two of them. Now, with the overwhelming odds against us, the literal embodiments of time and space used against us, the child, it all seems lost. But then Luker comes in his special Galarian phone booth. He couldn't make it. The guy whose whole purpose was to prevent Team Galactic from doing exactly this couldn't bother himself to show up. I'm making a complete what of myself, so... Okay, I guess the Lake Guardians always show up and Yep, the big daddy of shadows himself comes in with the block of the century and shatters the red chain's control over his siblings and swallows the evil team leader into the void. Okay, so just want to say, 1, every other legendary is a bum. Did Zygarde show up to stop Lysandre? No. But a tower? Sure. Did the Swords of Justice pull up against Team Plasma and their Frankenstein's monsters? Nuh-uh. Lugia, Ho-Oh, the Beasts, Birds, Mew itself. None of them stepped in when that Bang Baby that was made in a test tube blew up like he didn't know nobody. 4. Paldea's legends did... well... okay, those guys actually all have like a screw loose or just genuinely evil, so maybe it's fine that they didn't get involved with the Dr. Robot crisis. But yeah, the rest of y'all are bums compared to this buzzer-beaten bastard, knocking Cyrus away from the rim of success. God, I'm gonna have to see some more hustle out of those losers, that's all I'm saying. But once that problem kind of solves itself, Cynthia comes in to say that she's sorry for not doing anything to prevent that, which, you know, thanks babe, if you weren't literally a goddess, I'd have to put you on fraud watch. Not giving a pass to the other main characters in the back row just watching all this happen. But also, she says we need to go into the portal ourselves or like turn it off before the distortion destroys all of Sinnoh. Hey, Dialga, Palkia, you know, we just kind of helped save you. Could you do us a solid and... Fuck! Does anyone around here do anything? Hey, Arceus, I know you're up there, big man. Stop working on that photo collage and help us. Well, the Lake Guardians get their work boots on and strap in to help take down this menacing portal alongside us, with Cynthia noticing the being of Emotion Mesprit taking a special interest in us. I guess that's another metaphor, Refantasio, for how opposite we are to Cyrus. The Distortion World is very true to its name, being one of the most interesting locations in Pokemon design-wise to I think the Ultra Dimensions in Gen 7, which actually might be linked to this stuff, so put a pin in that for later. The Distortion, being the world's mirror, is an odd place to describe a shadow world with floating islands, with what looks like prehistoric plants and upside-down waterfalls. But still, it's an interesting looking area with a nice little strength puzzle. And waterfall without the HM, somehow, I'm not sure how we did that. It makes me really wonder if we ever really needed it. But the little lake guys help us through the path, with commentary by Cyrus and Cynthia, leading us to a final battle. Cyrus claims to want to defeat Giratina and capture it, so he'll be able to make both this world and our world corrupted to his whims. And also low-key describes Spiral Power from Gurren Lagann, but I don't know if that's intentional. Also, if I had a nickel for every time I got to do a Gurren Lagann reference in this series, I'd have 2. Which isn't a lot, but it is kind of interesting that not only could I do it twice, but the first one got me into that show. That show is great. Y'all should watch it.
Obviously, not letting this slide, we battle him one more time and defeat him, which just leaves the Ghost Centipede, and Cyrus warns us that defeating or capturing it will cause a singularity and wipe out the worlds. And then Cynthia, finally remembering she has autonomy, decides to call him out on that BS, saying that he has literally no proof of any of that, and we should just do whatever we feel is right. And after facing the world's shadow and capturing it, quick ball, Cyrus finally gives in and leaves to places unknown, saying that he is filled with all those negative emotions and feels incomplete, but refuses to stray away from his ultimate goal of creating the perfect world. Hey, shouldn't we, grab him or something? What? Cynthia and the player arrive back in the world above through the portal at the hidden fourth lake. And from here, it's business as usual as we battle our last gym leader and go on to defeat Cynthia herself. And what I think is actually an easier fight than the originals, but hey, whatever. Cue new cooler credit sequence as we then get invites from Barry to the new Battle Frontier, battling the Thunderfire 2-man to gain entry. The Battle Frontier this time is the same one we faced in Heart Gold and Soul Silver, but that's not fair as this came out first, and features Barry's dad as the head of the battle tower, still requiring us to face a number of trainers in different forms of standard battles to meet him. Argenta heads up the Battle Hall, a version of the battle tower where it's all 1v1, and the player gets to choose the type of their opponents to make things harder or easier for them. The Battle Factory returns with its usual gimmick of rental Pokémon, where you can win an opponent's Pokémon to strengthen your team, though this time it's headed up by Thornton instead. The Battle Arcade has a random chance gimmick that can strengthen or weaken the player or opponent's Pokémon before every fight, with Arcade Star Dahlia as its head, and also one of the first people of color in a Pokemon game.
You're not black.
People of color other than the vague Asian
white
that all anime
or
is.
Asian. Or whatever we are, I don't know.
I'm starting to feel like a Team 4-star bit. Finally leaving us with the Battle Castle, which had the player battle several opponents in a row like the others, but with a point system to give the players items, heals, or even information on their next opponent. Technically ran by the psychic trader Caitlyn, but her powers are too much for her to control, so you battle her butler Darich instead, though keep her in mind as we'll see her in the future. The Sinnoh Battle Frontier is cool. Yeah, you know my opinions on these kinds of things. I like them, but I'm not obsessed with them like many others. No, I prefer new areas and more Pokemon to catch, so the rest of the battle area is my vibe, along with all the new Pokemon available in Platinum's postgame. Another thing that I really love is gym leader rematches, and would you look at that, we got it! The Battleground, allowing us to rebattle the gym leaders with stronger teams, and even the stat trainers like Riley and Buck, which is awesome. Which, I guess I should have talked about those more before. The stat trainers are these guys we meet throughout the game in different little passages. You get to do little multi-battles with them. They're all really cool and have nice character traits, but you only really get to interact with them in these battle hubs. I probably should have mentioned that in the Diamond part. Though, back to the whole Battlegrounds or whatever, I kind of wish everybody had full teams, but it's still really cool to interact with these guys some more. And the Elite Four, Cynthia, and Barry get rematches as well, which gets stronger and stronger with every fight, which is also really cool. The additions to Platinum's story are okay. Some of it is kind of interesting, such as having Cynthia and Cyrus interact more, which is good because they are the two characters that I would have wanted to have a bigger dynamic in the actual game. Having more scenes with Cyrus obviously was a great call to try and build him out, but none of them really built him up as a character, showing us the things I would have thought would have been necessary in order to make him a satisfying villain. No, most of it is just stuff we already knew about him, and that's disappointing. But it also gave us one or two cool scenes, so I won't deny that. I especially find the one in Celestic Town interesting, just seeing how personal it was for him to destroy that monument. A part of his plan that really had nothing to do with anything, honestly. If you're going to remake the world, why go out of your way to destroy one mural? And not just this one, also the one on the way to Spear Pillar too. It just felt like this personal disgust he had for such places that celebrate the world and represent its creation. he shows disgust and anger pretty openly. And though it doesn't build his motivation, it is good to see how visceral his feelings are, even if he denies them. Just wish Charon wasn't here to steal most of the spotlight from the more important characters like Cyrus. Looker is good, pretty fun for some comedy, and then coming through at the end of his and Charon's little arc in the post-game, but this isn't his best showing. We'll have to wait some time for that. Overall though, I think it is safe to say that this is the best official showing for the Sinnoh region. That times 10 if we count all the different ROM hacking endeavors that basically make this game perfect. There are some things about the OG Platinum that I think aren't as good as the original games, such as Saturn losing his Kadabra for a Golbat, which makes him feel less unique. I wish the gym leaders in Elite Four were still allowed to mix more typings, even with an expanded Dex roster, and I will always be sore about the lack of choice for that midsection of gameplay. But that was an issue in the originals as well. I can hardly say that it's worth docking any points from an otherwise step up in quality. Part of me will always love Diamond more than Platinum, but I'll never pretend that it isn't the definitive way to play through one of my favorite games of all time. Cheerio, Game Freak, cheerio, you made a banger right there. This is the definitive third version outside of Emerald's more fleshed out storyline.
Get ready to embark on a thrilling Pokémon adventure. Explore a rich and colorful landscape. Catch, battle, and trade incredible Pokémon. And don't miss out on an epic experience coming for the first time to Nintendo Switch. Find yourself in the Sinnoh region in Pokémon Brilliant Diamond and Pokémon Shining Pearl. Available November 19th. Rated E for everyone. Only on Nintendo Switch.
Man, this is going to be biased as a distortion world. So, during the 8th generation of Pokemon, Game Freak, eager to put a new spin on the concept of a Pokemon title, began working on a new vision for what a return to an old region could look like. Bringing us the Legends style of game started with Legends Arceus, focusing on action and giving a new spin to the older region by setting it within a new time period, with a lot of leaks and articles at the time claiming that the idea of a normal Diamond and Pearl remake was literally not even in the cards. Which is more of a rumor than a stated fact, but most people, myself included, believed that some at the company, probably investors, were kind of worried that a new style of Pokemon wouldn't really take off. So they brought in a third-party company they could trust with the IP to whip up a safer remake to boost sales in the meantime, figuring that the newer game wouldn't sell as well. They were wrong. Legends Arceus came out to rave approval and applause. It had many issues, sure, but it was overall seen as a good new direction for the company to take going forward, and leaving the safe remake in the dust. And that was probably for good reason. The actual remake came out to very negative scores, with the biggest complaint being how safe the games really were, with how little they changed, and of course the visual style just looking really bad. God, I was tweaking when this shit hit the internet like the second tower. Like, those videos are still on the channel. Hell, my first one was my actual idea for a Diamond and Pearl remake, and I was being what I thought was sort of reasonable, saying that it would unfortunately be a lot like Sword and Shield, even with Dynamax, but those assholes came in from left field and shattered my kneecaps with this bootleg My Sims looking game. But I'll hold that for right now. First things first, we gotta check on gameplay. Alright, gameplay wise, Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl is basically Diamond and Pearl again. I mean, yeah, obviously it's a remake of a game, but this is way more just a remake than the others. They even claim that the game is like a one-to-one recreation of Diamond and Pearl, but that has to have the biggest asterisk ever known to man, because it's basically an excuse for them not to add any of the things from Platinum's exclusive content and newer Pokemon into the game, while also going ahead and just adding fairy typing and literally every single Pokemon from Gen 1 through 4 into it anyway. And for some reason, they just didn't even add stuff like new forms from its sister game. They just did this one-to-one BS to cover their asses from critique, because in reality, they did not give ILCA the amount of time they would have needed to polish this game. And before I dig into that, let's look at the additions, shall we? Yeah, the additions, because this isn't one-to-one. The overworld is now full 3D, more analog movements instead of the grid-based system from Diamond and Pearl, which for the most part works okay, but mostly kinda just makes simple maneuvers from the original die impossible to manage, because you can't just switch to the classic grid style like in ORAS. No. You're gonna have to thug this wonky movement out whenever you need to do something even slightly precise. Following Pokemon is here, which is something. I'm kind of glad to see this feature brought into the game, and they even expanded on Amity Square, which is pretty cool, even adding like a new Poffin style minigame that kind of acts like Curry and Sword and Shield. Now I'm even wondering why there's a limit on what Pokemon are allowed in Amity Square if all of them have following animations. But like, the following Pokemon actually do help you find stickers and items as you walk with them outside the park, which is nice. They do still sadly have the following Pokemon problem on the Switch, of them just being plain out of step with the player, either being slow with Sin or just randomly switching speeds, cause none of them are balanced to actually follow you. Y'all had this on lock and let's go, the literal first chance at bat, and you're not even close to fixing it, even in ZA, and even then just like kind of barely? God, HMs have been replaced with an app on the Pokédex, which is good, and it works by summoning a random Pokemon from the environment, which you'd think would just be any of the wild ones in the area you're in, because obviously most of the animations are just a little cutscene and a Pokemon just appearing, but no, instead it's always a Bidoof, Bibarel, or Staraptor, even in places where it makes no sense they'd actually live at. And it feels like they're making, you know, an HM slave joke, because they're like most likely the Pokemon you'd use those HMs on, which, you know, is kind of funny. But if you're doing that, I'd wonder why not just go all in and make all the HMs used by a specific specially trained Bibarel with like a utility belt and a little propeller hard hat to fly you around. Goofy, maybe, but they're already making whole animated specials for this meme, so why not go all the way and even have like a specific Bibarel trainer who trains them all to use those moves, and actually do like a cosplay Pikachu bit, but with Bibarel and HMs. Yeah, but with that, I probably put way more thought into this than they did, so Also, why even include fog in the overworld if it has no effect in battle? Hell, you can barely see it in the battle scene, and then it's just blinding in the overworld, and it's just worse than the original. You get to choose your bike color, which is neat. You know, I can't see it, but it's a cool addition, and it kind of like references the Mach and Acrobite a little. I hate the suit. I hate the bike outfits they've started doing. It just looks dumb. It was just kind of something they've been doing with bike analogs on the Switch, and I really wish it was just like a helmet and some pads instead of this full design thing that just kind of ruins my custom character, which, hey, we got customization, and it's not as like module as it used to be, because, well, you know, your trainer has to have 2 individual models for the overworld and battle, but it's kind of alright, some neat fits in here. I'm particularly fond of this overall visor look. I know it's kind of a lame fit, but like it kind of horses around to kind of being nice to look at in my opinion. And I like the post-game vacation outfit, that one was pretty cool. The platinum outfits being pre-order only super sucks. That should have been a freebie, what the hell? Gambling is now illegal to sell to kids unless it's sports gaming, so have a costume shop instead is way better than them just looking homeless like in ORAS. Wonder Trading is here, but is online exclusive and you couldn't pay me to buy that shit.
The Grand Underground is actually an improvement on the originals in every single way, adding a lot more to the mining and base building aspects, as well as having these new little dungeon areas that feature extra Pokemon for the player to capture that's not already within the main Sinnoh dex, including some like Munchlax, which were a super pain to get the normal way through Honey, and the Platinum exclusives who should have been there from the start. But hey, we also get Teddiursa and Pinsir as 2 new extras, so I guess take that, Platinum. Sorry, buddy, Ursaluna is extinct till next year. We'll talk about exclusive mons in a bit, but for this, it's actually a good expansion on a feature from the original games, and I am glad it's here. I do really enjoy this new feature. Obviously, we don't have the PAL Park anymore because there is no GBA slot, so how does this area even work in the new game? Well, now it's known as Reminisce Park, which I wonder if it's like supposed to be like a play on Reminisce. I don't know, I really should have looked that up earlier. But anyway, this place has all these shrines that need a Game Boy styled slab inserted to capture various legendary Pokemon. Which actually reminds me a lot of an idea I had for that Diamond and Pearl remake video, where I said it'd be nice to get GBA cartridges in special locations in the overworld to like plug into your Pokétch and find more Pokemon. I do appreciate that they wanted to reinvent that old feature into a modern interpretation. Though my idea was a little cooler, if we're being honest. Though this and its sister game having a super boss Giratina is pretty interesting. I like that. Stop bringing back non-reusable TMs. Like, no one likes grinding for these things. It's stupid. Stop doing that. Contests unfortunately did not get the same upgrade they did in ORAS, and instead they were gutted, not only removing the decoration feature, but also like any sort of actual challenge from the dance section, which is just... why? Like, for real. These were what made the Sinnoh games contests unique from Hoenns. Why did we make them such a non-factor now? Like, I get we don't have time to, like, know whatever Pokemon looks like in every possible outfit, but the dancing part? Where we get to set our own rhythms and trick up the opponent? Why get rid of that? Why? Especially with how popular rhythm games are nowadays. That was actually really cool. Why do we keep slandering contests, man? Like, these were really cool before, and I wish they'd bring them back and do it right, you know? Not any of those half-baked pretenders, though the movie stuff was cool in black and white too. Seals actually did get quite an upgrade in comparison to contests, meaning we actually get to use them more in the main game and really get in depth with how we decorate them by choosing where they show up in 3D, which is really cool. I won't lie, they do get quite the leg up for this game. Yeah, it's just too bad we'll never see him again. Maybe, I don't know, I've not seen what Gen 10 looks like yet. So, in battles, it's basically the same as Sword and Shield, minus the Dynamax. We got modern Pokemon gameplay, new types, moves, effects, you know the drill. The experience share is here and you can't turn it off. And it low-key makes the game just so easy alongside the power of affection, which your Pokemon's just gonna gain from them being in your party or walking around with them. And it makes things really unfair for your opponents, which actually do get some like new upgrades and interesting changes to make the game like a slight bit more challenging. Well, in theory. In actual gameplay, it's like the Quick Claw level 26 Starly. Yep, sorry, Barry. Even with your Orange Dream Domain expansion, nothing's gonna save you. Which is really sad, because I mean, some of these changes are pretty good. Byron with the Trick Room Sandstorm set, and the Elite Four straight up have like competitively bred Pokemon. It's just that we're comically over-leveled. And again, our Mons just have Ultra Instinct. I guess you didn't love your Mons enough, Barry. I just started skipping fights. It was just so boring after a while. Cynthia actually was pretty cool. Her AI knowing to do things like shift, storm drain Gastrodon into water moves was really cool. But Swords Dance Rough Skin Garchomp can go to hell. Who came up with that? The full gym leader rematches were nice. I think I even like them better than the ones in Platinum, which is cool. And you're even able to like fight with them and fight against more important characters in the post-game battle facility, which was sick because they even add in more Pokemon other than their main typing to like aid their strategies, which I really like. I love it when they do that. But just having the battle tower was really lame. Like, we couldn't at least spring for the battle frontier. why? Why? Like, you could have at least had them all in the same building, you know? It wouldn't have been the same, but it would have been better. We're already compromising so many things for this remake. We're actively going out of its way to cut things from Platinum, and it's just plain ridiculous. Why limit yourselves this way? I know they wanted to like rush it out, but at least rush the better version you already have, you know? We don't even get the story content from Platinum added. It's the exact same to Diamond and Pearl, right down to only having one legend appear. It's actively ridiculous to shoot yourself in the foot this way. At least Let's Go try to be its own thing. It mostly failed, but it was trying. Like, why aren't there more Pokemon from the later generations? Not even Sylveon? You know how much these losers love those dumb foxes, and you couldn't even spare the one? And there's no excuse for the Hisuian forms not being here in any shape or form. If this is supposed to be a sister release, there needs to be more connections to it besides one book to help you find Manaphy in another game. Why did they make mystery gifts the same as they did before? Like where you have to like download it or have all this other crap. They don't even give you a freebie like with Deoxys at the end of Oraz. Do you know how easy it would have been to have a Looker plotline where he falls into Hisui or something and then pops back into our timeline, allowing us to get the Hisui stuff, or at least transfer them over? I mean, falling into time-space portals is his whole deal after a while. Looker's not here, Charon ain't here, which is odd because they did add the Rotom room and it still has his journal that was attributed to him, but he's not in the game, so I guess Cyrus did us a favor and put him down like Larry for torturing his friend. I want to ask, like, what was the purpose for limiting yourselves like this? But like, I know what it is. The game was made on the cheap to be rushed out in case the game they actually wanted to make didn't sell well. And isn't that just peachy? Isn't that just fun? Like you're putting your heart and your soul into a title and then somebody tells you, you know, we have no faith in you, so they grab somebody else to shit out an iPhone release for $60, and it's just embarrassing compared to another version of that same game that came out 20 years ago. Like, for real? It was so embarrassing. The fans came in with blackjacks and Lopunnies to add in everything you said couldn't be in it, and they did it in months. White man did it in 1 week.
White man did it in 1 week.
I know. I shouldn't be bringing ROM hacks in for this like comparison, but like, isn't that embarrassing? And it's not like ILCA just has like no experience. They've made a few games. In fact, quite a few I enjoy. This is not on them. This is on the people at the top and just how little time these things actually have to come out. And I know that's just never gonna change. I've seen the leaks, you've seen the leaks. We've got more games coming at the same pace they've always had. And it took until an actual global pandemic to force them to hold something back. And the cherry on top is just how this game looks. Who decided this? The chibis we'll get to, but this hazy, glazy color scheme that makes the whole thing look like it's being played on a buttery smudged screen, the contrast on the color is just so off. It doesn't look right till like the dark of night comes in. Most of the models look like they're made of styrofoam. I don't know why they just look so off to me. It looks like plastic, kind of like Let's Go, but softer. I don't get it. Does that even make sense? The water looks like weird jello. The trees look ridiculous with how uniform they are. And I know, some would try to argue that it's taking ties from other remakes on the Switch like Link's Awakening and Let's Go. But in my opinion, its problem is that it doesn't look half as good as either of those games. And that's because it mixed them up in the first place and half-assed both. It tried to have its cake and eat it too. Let the overworld gameplay look all chibi and classic, like how the 2D sprites did on the DS, and then you get your more modern stuff in the battles, but it didn't really have the time to polish either, so it leaves everything looking color-wise washed out, and animation-wise really stiff, not to mention just how jarring it all looks when you have to mix chibi models with the end battle ones. Like, how could they do that for the fucking following Pokemon? It looks awful. I know some would just point out that the 3DS did something similar for the 6th generation, but if you really think any of this is comparable, you're as high as a man-tight kite. Yes, the 3DS looked a little bit chibi in the overworld, and the OG games have the same layout in its overworld, but you gotta understand that certain things like artistic intent and hardware limitations are real things. These were weaker consoles, and sometimes to get things to look and play how you wanted it to, you had to compromise while still letting the games have that classic feel. Look at the ORAS cutscenes and don't even try to pretend it's as goofy and as jarring as what they do in BDSP. Why is Cyrus's open mouth doing the Wojak face? His whole thing is bottling up his emotions. If a certain thing doesn't translate well, you shouldn't try and force it, especially when you don't have the time to polish it. Even in those old 3DS games, they didn't zoom in at angles that made the models look ridiculous. I'm scratching my head to even think of a way to show these damn things without it coming off amateur. And the full models look lifeless. Like, what are you looking at, Rowan? And you wanna know the worst part? I could have respected it. I really could have respected it. If they took a real risk and make the whole game chibi and really polish it up. Hell, if they just aped the classic origami style from Ranch and Rumble, that would have been cool. If you're only adding the battles in like full model cause that's like the models you had that like fit it, guess what? You already got all the Rumble guys up to Gen 7 in HD along with their megas. If they had done that and made the characters look more like Mii's, I would have totally been down for a $30 Diamond and Pearl remake. With all the modern Pokemon made on the cheap, it could have been something special. It could have looked exactly like the original too, you know, that kind of flat 2D look, but give it some perspective, kind of like Black and White's battles, maybe except for the blurry backgrounds. Or better yet, use the Rumble models, but have the crazy camera work from Battle Revolution, making this a weird little love letter for that era of games. I'm sure it would have been critiqued to hell and back, but I could have respected it a lot for utilizing what little time you had to make an optimal experience with more content than the original games. Or better yet, give your teams more time and get the Square Enix HD 2D guys on this, like, duh! A perfect one-to-one remake could have been made, but they didn't want that. They wanted something out quick and fast and for full price, which as any artist knows, it's impossible. You pick two, never all three. God, it hurts me every time I see that beautiful art book with the vibrant cities filled with people and Pokemon. It like perfectly reflects the vibe our childhood brains imagined this world looking like. But that's not fair. Like, I know, it was never going to be that. That was not their intention to make it that way. Hell, even the main fully funded games don't have something like this until the one where it was literally a single town. But you've heard this all before. More time. It ain't happening till we stop buying all these games. And I'll admit it, I'm bad for that as well. But at the very least, I didn't buy this absolute garbage. I'm borrowing it to record for this video, and then I'm probably never gonna play it again. Man, it is so hard to recommend this when literally every other way is just a better way to play through Sinnoh. But is BDSP a bad game? Yeah, I'd like to try to tell you it might be okay because it's still Sinnoh, and if it's your only way to play it, but for real, if you're watching this video, we both know you can use the thing you're watching this on to play something better. I hate that this game is going to give eyebrows to ILCA because they don't deserve that. And we know from interviews they wanted to do more, but the Game Freak higher-ups didn't let them since they did not want Arceus to be overshadowed. They just needed a backup plan. Second fiddle. That is not what a beloved region deserved. Oh my god, and the music. Oh, it's worse. It's like missing a lot of the bass and percussion from the original. It's not as energetic or foreboding, and if you play this game without the big day one update, then you have to listen to these
awful midis, which is supposed to be the DS sounds, like how Heart Gold and Soul Silver had the GB sounds, which is just ridiculous. Why not use the actual DS music? We don't have the sound chip issue anymore. And then like they didn't have any credits, no post game, the intro sequence, and a lot of stuff is just not on the cartridge, and it like requires a 6 gig update? Oh, man, what the hell is this game? I'll tell you what it is. A metaphor. Refantasio. For society and game companies who don't give a shit and never ever will. Again, there are better ways to play Diamond and Pearl. Do those, or do mods. I don't know. Unity is cracked, so I'm sure we'll have a new overworld imported in a year or two. They already have Battle Revolution animations and models, which is a huge hell yeah, and a hell why for the actual company making this. But that's Sinnoh, my home away from home in video game form. So much of me is within the confines of this region. It almost feels like fate if you believe in such things. But hey, maybe by the time we're actually done covering this region, we'll all have a little bit of faith sparked within us as well. Well, what do you mean? What does that mean? The faith or the done with the region? Well, obviously we're only halfway through this bit of Pokemon. We still have 3 more games that take place within the Sinnoh region. Yeah, I'm serious, but hold on, we can get there. For now, this region will be the one that will always remain special to me, and I hope I made that part clear to all of you within the confines of this overly long, probably a bit indulgent video. Here's the current rankings, including the first part, half, whatever of our Sinnoh journey. Pretty obvious, I think, except for OBDSP. It got knocked quite a bit lower than it probably deserves due to how much of it is just a thankless copy-paste job. But I've made my peace, and this part is all opinion anyhow. No, never mind, that game's ass and I'll stamp that as a fact. The regular releases though? Mint. 10 out of 10. Kinda. I don't know, I just like them a lot. As for Barry, well, I think this position right here fits him pretty well. He's not my favorite rival, and honestly, he doesn't really do anything that wows me, but I can't say he's the worst. I like him enough. I guess. Okay, how about our teams? For my first game, I wanted to go with a classic team full of mons that I love, including the OG Evergreen the Torterra. My favorite Pokemon is actually a really decent starter, with great coverage moves and some strong stab options like Wood Hammer and Earthquake. In fact, he's one of the few starters that's actually super effective to both of the others, which is ironic since Empoleon is the one water starter not weak to grass, funnily enough. The only real problem with Torterra is that crippling 4 times weakness to ice, which without some pretty big upsides will always have it be frowned upon in more competitive settings. It's a very common attack type, but something like that isn't always a nail. Most great Pokemon are 4 times weak to something. It's just Torterra focusing more on bulk means he can't outspeed some other better attackers. But that's competitive wise. In game wise, he's damn good, doing the job of most grass starters, but way better. And that speed problem has some pretty easy fixes. I love to gamble with a Quick Claw. Just imagining this large world turtle going light speed is hilarious and terrifying. A more permanent option is actually something like Rock Polish or Trick Room, though another funny strategy I like is a loaded dice set in modern games. Rock Blast, Bullet Seed, it hits harder and more often than either Stone Edge or Wood Hammer with none of the downsides. It's super fun. Being my first Pokemon, of course, I will always have a soft spot for it. Even during the intervening years where as a child I would pick and choose other favorites, Torterra, Evergreen, will forever be my GOAT. I love this Pokemon.
Skidoof the Bibarel. Named after a plush Bidoof that my brother gave me for my birthday, the forever HM slave will always have some unique utility, and Skidoof was no different. Water normal, odd combo, but can be useful in a pinch with stab headbutt, waterfall, and of course, being a normal type, you get plenty of TMs other than the standard hidden moves that add to their arsenal. And nothing beats a good Super Fang to divide and conquer an opponent. GOAT Pokemon right here. I just kinda wish Bibarel wasn't falling down the Meowth Pikachu pipeline of being less popular than its pre-Evo. But Bidoof is pretty cool. Thumper the Steelix. God, seeing Brock and Rourke's Onyxes in the anime was always a treat. I don't know if you know this, but I'm absolutely a bigger is better kind of man. Steelix, a generational Pokemon with a killer design and great showings in the anime and the video games, and it can even be a really good battler. Not the hardest hitter, but it can tank 90% of hits, and with some proper setup, you can get a sand-rushing gyro baller that can one-shot some evil threats. And with the different fangs you can get for good coverage during a playthrough, God, Steelix is like a top 10 Pokemon for me. I love this worm to death. Though the name might sound a little odd if you're wondering why Thumper. It's named after the one you get in X and Y. I didn't really have like a concrete name for it till then. Speaking of odd names, Pancake the Skuntank. Okay, that name probably needs more info than Thumper. I guess my childhood self was thinking Flower from Bambi, who I always thought was a girl. And I thought like how powder flour was sweet, or like I thought about it like in the baking kind of powder. And then like flour is as in pancake flour. I was an LOL random bastard, alright? It was just the style at the time. Skuntank is such a funny Pokemon. Obviously, a poison farting skunk is just a classic in any sort of children's media. But what's extremely funny about this one is it's also known for shooting fire. I guess because methane? And also, it's not shooting from its butt like Platinum would like you to believe. Instead, it shoots it all from the tip of its tail, which is pretty interesting. I actually like how this thing has like a sort of parallel with Perugly. They're like the two villainous cats, you know? And I like to think they're a reference to Pepe Le Pew and that cat he's always chasing around, because I really don't know any other time that skunks and cats are like paired together. Well, Over the Hedge did it. Skuntank is actually a really fun Pokemon to use with like a wide variety of movesets. Very underrated in my opinion. And I think the Nexomon devs agree, because that's just the same guy. Not hating on that, by the way. This is a Nexo Truther household. Just fire skunks. It's cool. Fury the Rampardos. Another 10 out of 10 Pokemon with powerful attacks, but a bit shabby when it came to defenses. You know, that's what the other guy's for. No, Rampardos is pure all-out attack, double-edged sword. So go for that head smash. But don't be afraid to use some coverage moves, like a surfing Pachyosaurus is really cool. Though I do kind of wish the beta look would come back as like a Paradox/Convergent, or maybe even like a Mega with the spikes. They're just so brutally cool. Rock Dark, pure violent power, a true fury of the gods. Gina and Chomp, the two dim-witted demons who don't just balance each other out, but the field of battle as well. Light Screen, Reflect, Agility, Baton Pass, then Stab, Psychic, and Thunderbolt for coverage. This two-headed demon has it all. Except the typing. Normal Psychic does not fit the light-dark thing very well. Like maybe if it was actually Dark Psychic or Ghost Normal, maybe, like, as long as it's not Normal Dark. Yeah, I mean, I know that's kind of like what it was in the original betas, but during that beta, Normal had like extra buffs, and let's be honest, this poor thing does not need a 4x weakness. No, it does not need that. I mean, it can work, obviously. Obstagoon over there is like baiting a fighting move so it can use Obstruct, but a normal dark special attack user would be in for a bad time. So maybe it's fine that Girafarig ended up typed like it was. If that broken evolution is anything to go by, it probably ended up on a better path. Why didn't I wait for Scarlet and Violet? Well, I kind of did that in our first Scarlet and Violet review, and I didn't want to do that a second time. Plus, I just like using Giraffe Rig in these games. For Platinum, we actually start with one of my brother's favorites. Hell, both of my brothers, ironically. Flame the Infernape, a shonen protagonist in Pokemon form, even taking his ability to the 10th degree if we're looking towards the anime. Torrent, Overgrow, Blaze, Swarm, all of them the exact same, but none with the history of Blaze, and you can thank this traumatized baby for that. But Flame the Infernape is my brother's evergreen, so I raise my glass to this brutal mix attacker that rules the pitiful small fire kingdom of Sinnoh. Hey man, a king's still a king. Close combat, Flare Blitz, Earthquake, Shadow Claw, and Grass Knot to keep them guessing. This Monkey King can do wonders, and that makes the OG proud. Fiddle the Cricketune, the MVP of my playthrough, and I mean that. You know how I like to make good underdog stories with weaker mons, and it doesn't get better than an early game bug type. No matter how beautiful that melody was, that moveset is atrocious to level 20. But once you get some of the heavy hitters like Night Slash, X Scissors, Swords Dance, this thing has just the right amount of X Factor to win some hard-fought battles if you're smart enough. Though speaking of X Factor, Motor the Rotom. Yeah, that's an X Factor. A legendary in theme only, this Pokemon is versatility embodied, with access to powerful moves, but no extra typing, to really make the most of them till Gen 5. But hey, Electric Ghost is no joke. And with status moves to back it up, this creative little Pokemon is indeed something to marvel at. And with how he seems to be slowly taking over all corners of the Pokemon world, oh man, maybe Ultron would have been a better nickname. What? Oh, don't tell me you don't see a Rotom Skynet possibility in the future. Terapagos had to come up with those wild Terminators from somewhere. Rotom's a fantastic Pokemon that can stand the test of time. Now if we can only get its players to use a real washing machine. Quina the Licky Licky. A very strange mon, yes, but I'm nothing if not consistent. A bulky Pokemon with a wider range of moves, and for some reason is faster than Weavile? Yeah, a must pick, and a perfect name to boot, sharing it with a titular party member from FF9, Quina, who literally use their tongue to gobble up enemies and develop their powers. These big eaters are reliable and powerful if you take the time to build them up. Just beware, cause when they mop up, they do it Calosian style. As in a lot of tongue. Slurp sound effect here. Thor the Rhyperior, a name that works a little bit better when it has Lightning Rod as the ability, but it wouldn't be useful in a standard one-on-one playthrough, not that you can really play Platinum any other way. Get the ROM hacker sometime. Either way though, Rhyperior is one of my favorite Pokemon. Rhinos are just straight up my favorite animal, and I love the Godzilla inspiration. I know this brick house reinvention of Rhydon has some detractors, and fair enough I guess. It's not as streamlined as a design as its predecessor, but don't look down on my goat. With an impressive moveset, incredible bulk, and the ability to weaken many of its common weaknesses into zilch nothing? Yeah, this is a thundering god, alright. Just make sure you're out of the way when it wrecks house, okay? Flutter the Lumineon. It's hard to call it a sleeper pick, cause yeah, Lumineon isn't the strongest water type, and that really hurts cause that is the most common typing, meaning that there is literally always somebody else to do your job. Which is sad, because this thing actually has some really interesting moves it can learn, and it has a very elegant design. I really like it. Maybe with a secondary typing we can get some more stab on it, maybe Psychic plus some bulk to make it a reliable screen and tailwind setter, or maybe part bug for stab Silverwind, or hell, let's go poison like a lionfish. A fairy type Mega would have been stunning, but oh well. No matter where this pretty little fish marks on the tier list, it'll always be a must-have by my side. I love Lumineon, it's such a fun monster. Shining Pearl, Crown the Empoleon. Oh, how creative, Chubby, going with the body part name again. Well, what do you want me to say, alright? There's nothing much to add to Empoleon other than it got left behind in popularity due to that little pre-evolution Piplup. Which I blame Dawn for, by the way. It's a real shame because Empoleon is such a solid design. Water and Steel is such a fun typing. I still think Blastoise should be one, especially since they keep putting him in stuff like car garages and stuff. But Empoleon, it's cool, powerful, great type, great design. Sorry man, I ain't got much. Though my cousin was a big fan of you when we played the games when we were little, so that was kind of cool to have like the 3 starters represented in my little family. Thorns the Roserade, great example for what an evolution can do for a Pokemon. Roselia was a fun, decent little Pokemon in the original Ruby and Sapphire. A sort of Blossom Vileplume analog, but it just didn't compare to some of the other grass options. And then here comes Roserade, a monstrous Pokemon that still rocks the boat to this day. A great offensive moveset with all the status moves that come with a Poison Grass typing. Energy Ball, Weather Ball, Shadow Ball, Moonblast, Sludge Bomb. This girl is ballin' on all the others in the game. A very powerful Pokemon that works for just about every team. Though, I kind of feel like they dropped the ball in one way with this Pokemon. But not in Gen 4. In Gen 8, there really should have been a joke about Roserade being only like an inch tall, then Gigantamaxing to be like a foot tall in Sword and Shield. I know that's not like a real problem, but it'd be very funny. Jaws the Garchomp. Yeah, it's a Garchomp. Do I need to say any more? Powerful, fast, hard to kill. The thing's a literal demon. Like a literal demon. So damn strong. Stronger than not just its first Mega, but also its second one they made a decade later. Imagine hitting the bullseye like that on the first try. Generational design right here. It's a combination jet, shark, dinosaur, dragon, pirate. God bless, this is peak. Nothing else to say. Best fighter in Pokken. Literally fight me. Teeth the Pinsir. Yeah, bad name. Probably the one time I should have just kept the name the same, but whatever. Pinsir is another Pokemon that's pretty popular, but nowhere near as much as its counterparts Scyther and Heracross. And that's because while Pinsir is kind of powerful, its moveset hardly helps it, only having one stab typing and then only one good move to use for it. God, the poor guy is in such a bind, but with a decent attack stat and a unique freaky design, I like to think they're underrated. And though it was only added to fill in an open slot, it was cool for him to be included in BDSP, as Scyther is his version counterpart again. Though for real, Game Freak, when is Tricules finally gonna make a canon appearance? And don't tell me the Mega is holding you back. That didn't stop old Duraludon, did it? Bedla the Medicham. A Bedla is a traditional garb worn by belly dancers, which Medicham is based on. Another Pokemon that's commonly seen, but not exactly a fan favorite, even with its really cool Mega. That being said, it's actually, and say it with me now, quite versatile. Thank you. With plenty of moves to make use of, especially physical, which may seem odd if you look at its stat spread, but that only tells half the story, as its OP ability Pure Power actually doubles that paltry number to a whopping 120, which is very similar to Azumaril's Huge Power if you remember from Johto. Well, actually, it's the exact same ability, but the name changed. I don't know, maybe that's like a weird translation thing. It does kind of make me wonder why the karate guy in Black and White 2 got that instead of Pure. But anyway, yeah, it's got a really good ability. It's just too bad none of its other stats are anything special. Like maybe if it had absurd speed, or it was like a great special attacker, like to make it like a mixed attacker. Medicham's just kind of a beast that can only be beaten by special moves or abilities that cancel out Pure Power. Unfortunately, it was born in Hoenn, so that means it has the Curse of the Slab. It's kind of mid. Still love the Pokemon though, it's always nice to see this thing pop up from time to time. Horns the Glalie, main 3 of the guys on this team that technically have pretty interchangeable names, honestly. But yeah, Glalie, the OG evolution for Snorunt that was left behind when his pretty cousin hopped in the picture. I love Glalie's design. This weird hockey mask Oni, which probably should have been a rock type if that Pokedex entry is real, but it's like one of the most unique Pokemon on the list. You know, it is still one of the most unique Pokemon they've ever made. It's just that Frostlass does about everything Glalie does, but better. It hits harder, it's way faster. They added the Ghost Stab. I mean, technically it's frailer, yes, but it's far more dangerous. And now with its own Mega, Glalie doesn't even have that over her. Don't get me wrong, I love an underdog, and Glalie has the ability to wreck house when properly set up. And, you know, that's ultimately why I like it better. The floating head is just cooler to me. I don't know. Though Game Freak really does need to start balancing split evolutions, like at least a little bit. Even if there are like a generation apart, it's just not fair to some of these guys. If you're gonna make a really strong new one, then please buff the old one. I think that's fair, right? All 18 of these beasts got me through my favorite region in Pokemon, and I appreciate that. It's always nice to replay with some of my favorites in some of my favorite games. As for next time, well, I'm sure you can guess what's coming, or at least a good third of it, as we delve into the rest of the region that I love. Now y'all take care, you hear? That's like a country accent. It's a metaphor. It's a reference. Refantasia.